Well, Brian, we went out with a bang.
Mhm.
2023 with a great Upon Further Review show, and we're back. It is now 2024. Happy New Year to everybody out there. And we're just going to pick up right where we left off with another great show. It is Tuesday, January 2nd.
We're going to kick off 2024 talking about the 2023 season.
You're darn right we are, because that's how things go. This is day one of the offseason officially. As far as Irish Breakdown is concerned, but there is so much to talk about looking back, obviously, but also looking forward. And that is what we do. And we're going to take you guys with us the entire way. We got spring practice. We've got the summer. We've got fall. I mean, you name it. We got it. It's coming and we're going to bring it to you. But that's Brian. I'm Vince. And it's going to be the two of us pretty much all week, Brian.
Or just me.
I was going to say, except for tomorrow, you're going to do your normal Wednesday show, and then you and I will be back on Thursday with the defensive side of what we're going to talk about today offensively. And then Friday, we're going to do a free-for-all mailbag.
Okay.
Why? Because we can. And that's how the afternoon shows are going to go. And then IB Nation Sports Talk is going to be back with a vengeance. Both Steyer's boys are back from Kansas. And so we're going to do a three-man show tonight on Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And then take tomorrow off because whatever, we got travel and all kinds of stuff going on. Thursday, Jesse and I are going to do a show at 6 o'clock. And then Friday is going to be the three of us again at 6 o'clock. So lots of stuff coming your way, folks, all week long. So just strap in as the boys do on defense. We're putting the seatbelt on. We're strapping in. It's going to be a great offseason. But today, Brian, we're going to talk about the 2023 offense, where it met expectations, where it may have exceeded expectations, where it may have not gotten to the expectation at some points as well. So it's all offense today. That's what we do. And I'm excited to jump right in.
You know, Vince, this conversation is going to be so interesting because, you know, there's this vibe about the offense that is just very odd.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of have a conversation about the offense where it's like a rational, balanced conversation. And we're going to do our best to try to do that because there are some things about this offense that were really good. Like really good. And we're going to dive into some of the numbers as we get into this. But then there was other parts of the offense, Vince, that you look at it and you're like, how are you not a better team? How are you not a better unit? I mean, how did you show this potential this time and then come out and look like this against that? It's just such a hard story to tell. And it's going to kind of, at the end of the day, you want to talk about this big picture. We'll talk about the offense, but the offense is the primary reason for this big picture vibe, in my opinion. This team, for me, this 2023 Notre Dame team is going to go right up there for me, along with the 2015 and the 2017 teams as the what-if teams for Notre Dame.
Sure.
That what-if team, when I'm watching teams play this weekend, I'm like, could Notre Dame, could Texas, Washington, Michigan, and Alabama all beat Notre Dame? Of course they could. Could Notre Dame play with and beat them on their best day? Of course they could. And you look to next year, you know, you say, well, you know, I don't know if there's going to be any great teams next year. And then that may be true. We don't know yet, right? There's still a lot.
There's so much to go happen.
Portal kids coming in, coming out, the NFL declarations, all that. But what I know is this team should have been better. This team should have been in one of the 4 playoff teams. And they could have played with those teams. And so when I just look at it like that, Vince, and it's just a frustrating story because when they were good, they were really good.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it as we kind of just give an overview, but that's just such a hard story to tell because there are some people that are just incapable of recognizing how good the offense was for most of the season. I mean, for most of this season, this offense was outstanding. One of the best we've ever seen. I mean, think about it. Notre Dame broke an all-time scoring record this year in points per game, total points, and 40-plus point games, right? And they didn't just break the record. They shattered the record. the points per game record they beat by almost a full point. A record that was set, Vince, when Newt Rockne was a senior on the team. That's when the previous scoring record got beat. The modern record was set in 1968 when Terry Hanratty was the starting quarterback. Joe Theismann was the backup quarterback on that team. That's how long ago that was. And so when you're breaking records like that, you can't ignore that. But then, and that's what made it so frustrating when you'd watch the Ohio State game happen and the Louisville game happen,
The Duke game
happen, and the Duke game happen.
Yeah.
You're like, man, like this team won 10 games this year. They scored at least 40 points in 9 of those 10 wins. Think about that. We've never seen a Notre Dame team ever score 40 points or more than 6 times in a season, ever. This team did it 9 times. They did it just 6 if you only look at the offensive points. And yet then you come back and you say, but on the biggest stages of the season, with one exception, well, 2 exceptions, not enough times, I'll say it like that, not enough times in the biggest moments of the season was this offense able to make the plays to win you games. And when you Ohio State and they had chances to put that game away, failed twice on 4th and 1. When you look at Duke, yeah, you had the late comeback. So, you know, you got it. Sometimes you have an off day. They did what they needed to do to win the game at the end. Good to go. Louisville, just no energy, poor execution. Some of the dumbest, like, what? How does that even happen? Like the Blake Fisher hands to the face to negate the 30-yard gain by Mitchell Evans. And you're just like dropping passes and not competing for the ball. You're just like, how does this happen when you're in a playoff hunt? Then you see Clemson game, 6 possessions, 6 straight possessions in the second half where you got a chance to tie the ball game up and you don't even cross midfield, you know? And it's like, how does that happen in one breath? And then this super explosive dynamic, you know, 40-plus points a game. I mean, we're talking about, if I'd have told you before the year Notre Dame's going to score 39.2 points per game, score over 500 points in the season, go over 40 points per game in 9 games, we'd be talking about, dude, they might win the championship. Like, that's what we would have said before the season. This team has a chance to win a championship. They went 9-3. You know, with a defense that ranked in the top 10 in just about every category. So it's such a hard story to tell, Vince, because you have to be able to talk about that this offense was as good as it was, as often as it was, but you also can't ignore the fact that in many of the biggest moments, I mean, NC State, they played great. USC, they played great. They did what they needed to do. I mean, so there was their moments, and those were big games. I mean, you can't ignore. At the time, USC was an undefeated top 10 team. That was a big moment. They stepped up to play. And, you know, NC State, that was a good team, won 9 games, you know, top 25 team. That's a big win. You scored 45 points. You know, you did what you needed to do. And then there were some great storylines that happened that we'll get into. But at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to, even though the offense was way better than we'd ever seen for stretches when the bright lights were brightest, it was the same old Notre Dame deep offensively, and that they weren't able to get it done. And so that's why this, and that's what a lot of people are going to choose to focus on. And I still say at the end of the day, the vitriol towards Jared Parker was disappointing to see from Notre Dame fans. There are plenty of things that are fair to criticize him for, but that he didn't get any credit for a lot of the good things we saw. It all goes back to the Andy Ludwig situation.
Sure.
And if you to tell the story of the 2023 season, you have to go back to that, because I believe that Jared Parker basically had the anger from Notre Dame fans towards that situation was taken out on Jared Parker.
It was a no-win. It's a no-win situation for him. He stepped into a no-win situation in that regard. And there was nothing that he could do that was going to change people's minds outside of win a national championship.
And exactly.
That's it. That's the only way that people would have been like, oh, yeah, he did a good job. Like and that's unfortunate for everything that you just said.
Yeah.
And you gave your opinion on how you feel about the offense. And I'm going to give my gut opinion. You know, as I sat there through 13 games, some in person, some on TV, whatever, right? And then I watch all these bowl games, and I see, you know, these high level games yesterday, and, you know, all of these different things. My gut tells me that the offense wasn't good enough. Like, that's what my gut says. It's like when it mattered the most, the offense wasn't good enough. Now, I'm not saying that they just racked up points and yards and all of those different things against garbage teams, because that's not true.
Right.
That's not true, right?
At times, it was, you know.
And at times it was, but guess what? Every single high-powered offense, LSU 2019 included, racked up a bunch of points and yards against garbage teams at times. It's all part of the average.
Right.
I mean, it's part of the average, right? And so I don't take that part away from Notre Dame, but like when you dive into the numbers, the offense was all time for Notre Dame. It just was.
Yeah.
Right? Overall, it was. But then when you sit back and you're not looking at the numbers and you're just thinking about the games and you're thinking about the moments and you're thinking about, because everybody has these moments that they remember from every season, right? And the 23 season, unfortunately for the offense and for me as a fan, I think about the times that the offense underachieved. Like the 6 straight possessions against Clemson. Like, I want to rip my hair out. You know what I mean? Because I know that this team is better than that, but they didn't step up when they needed to in that moment. And unfortunately, that's what I think about. Now, once we get removed from this season a little bit and we're looking back, maybe I start looking at this team like the 2015 offense, like the 2017 offense, like that kind of a deal. As of right now, still kind of in the moment. To me, it feels like they underachieved offensively. But my mind knows that that's wrong. My mind knows that part, like, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know that it is wrong, though, Vince.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is I think that's part of the storyline is I don't think that's wrong. I think we can say both are true at the same time. Like, this offense took a big leap this year.
Yeah.
Right. In a lot of ways. But what do we always say? It was true under Brian Kelly. It's true under Marcus Freeman. You're ultimately judged on what you do on the biggest stages.
Sure.
And at times this offense on the big stage stepped up and played well. And at times in the big stage, especially against the teams that had good defenses, with the exception of NC State, you didn't step up. And then that's the one anomaly. You say you weren't doing anything before the long weather delay.
Right.
And then you're able to come out and make some adjustments and go down and get some points and all that kind of stuff. And that's the big thing is there weren't enough. There were some fundamental flaws in this offense that there just weren't many teams on the schedule good enough to expose.
That's fair.
And the best defenses were able to expose them for the most part. And that's what it comes down to. And so that's ultimately the storyline is we can look at, because here's the way I look at it. It's a excitement, frustration dichotomy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The excitement is, dude, there's a lot of talent on this football team.
Sure.
I mean, you have this walk-on that nobody'd ever really heard of that breaks out and has this great season. You have a unanimous All-American left tackle. You have a second-team All-American running back who, we'll dive into, had just an all-time Notre Dame season. One of the 5 best individual seasons we've ever seen from a Notre Dame running back. You had a quarterback that will get a lot of heat for different things, but he had the best quarterback rating of a Notre Dame quarterback since Jimmy Clausen, who had one of the best, all-time yards per attempt seasons for Notre Dame. And so there just was a lot of things, Vince, that you're going to look at and say, boy, there's a lot to like. But at the end of the day, we're also can look at it and say, but in those moments where they needed to be at their best, they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the frustration is that this offense did take a big step. Sure. That should be the thing we're excited about. This offense is so much closer to becoming an elite offense than it's been since Charlie Weiss was here in 2005.
Agreed.
I mean, that's the only offense that I can look at and say it compares to this offense on a consistent basis.
Would you say part of the angst, part of the negative thoughts towards this offense, I think it's twofold for me. Number one was the Andy Ludwig to Jared Parker disaster scenario, whatever adjective you want to use there. I think that's number one. Number two, I also think it's the expectation of bringing in Sam Hartman and what he was going to be able to do with this offense. Yeah. I think the expectations were through the roof. I think rightfully so, but they were very high.
Right.
And the odds of meeting those expectations, you're talking national championship. National championship is what would
I
have
mean,
met the expectation.
getting to the playoff to me
Okay.
would have been like
Okay.
that thing. I don't know that everybody would have looked at this team and said, boy, they're just better than Washington. They're better than Georgia. They're better than Bama. No brainer. It's like I think they can play with those teams.
Sure.
But it just comes down to, and again, even in this chat, I mean, it's so easy to disprove some of the, like one of the comments is, it's not wrong. They blew eggs against above average teams. Again, just completely false. There are teams that were above average that Notre Dame lit up. There just wasn't enough of them. That's the
Right.
problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that's been true for, I mean, the only team I've ever seen on offense for Notre Dame that didn't just completely like falter against good defenses was 2015 offense, sort of, and then the 2005 offense. That's it. Because that offense played well in big games. I mean, even the Michigan game in 05, they didn't score a ton of points, but they did what they needed to do to win, to go on the road and beat Michigan, right? They did what they needed to do to beat USC. Defense just couldn't stop Matt Leinart on the final drive. I mean, the offense went right down the field and scored, gave him a late fourth quarter lead, right? Michigan State game that year, offense scored over 40 points. You know, even the Ohio State game, I mean, that was a great Ohio State defense, and they moved the ball on them. I mean, Brady threw for 280 yards. Darius Walker, I think, got 100 yards in that game. They just couldn't stop Ohio State. Every time they'd get close,
Right.
you know, the Ohio State, you know, would go down and score. The defense wasn't good enough. Well, the difference with this team compared to 15 and 05 is this team had a defense that could stop people. And that's the frustration. That adds to the frustration, too.
Right.
It's like, you guys had a defense. You held Ohio State to 17 points.
Right.
Yes, the defense should have stepped up on that final drive. We'll get into that on Thursday. But you shouldn't have put them in a situation where 17 points wasn't good enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they held Ohio State to fewer points than Michigan gave up against Ohio State, both at home. You know what I mean? I mean, like if you look at the way that the Notre Dame defense played against Ohio State, in my opinion, they played better against Ohio State than Michigan did. I mean, look at the numbers. You know, Ohio State's offense against Notre Dame had 366 yards of offense. They had 378 against Michigan. Notre Dame gave up 17 points. Michigan gave up 24 points. Notre Dame held Ohio State to 5.63 yards per play. Michigan gave up 6.52 yards per play. You know, I mean, they held them to fewer points than what Penn State held them to, who also supposedly has a great defense, which I think is a tad overrated. But you get the point that I'm going with here. Like, you played better against Ohio State than Michigan did. Difference is Michigan's offense in the second half stepped up and made plays. Notre Dame's didn't. That's ultimately, I mean, that's the story of the year, Vince, in a lot of ways. And that's the frustrating part about it is you can't say like, look, the problem is you can't. This is kind of what it goes down to, is there has to be an honest conversation about the offense, and there's just not enough of that.
Right.
You can't just dismiss, and we're already seeing it in the chat from people. You can't dismiss what they did against all the other teams. No Notre Dame offense has ever done what this offense did. Ever. Second best yards per play average in modern history. So since the end of World War II, only one offense has ever gone for more yards per play than this year's offense. That was the 15 offense. That's it. One. No offense in the history of Notre Dame football, going back to 1890, whatever, when they started playing football, has ever scored more points per game or had more 40-point plus per games than this offense. Dismissing that is just silly to me. Ignoring that is, they did it. Yeah, they mostly did it against bad teams, but you know who else? Nobody has ever done this. No, this isn't the first schedule that Notre Dame has played that had bad teams on it. This was a tough. I mean, in our last show, Vince, you got somebody asking, "This is the toughest schedule since when?" And that's what people acknowledge. But then when you start talking about the offense, it's, "Oh no, the schedule sucked."
Right.
Well, no, it didn't. It was a very tough schedule. Notre Dame lit up most of the teams on the schedule. And the problem is people want to dismiss that. And that's frustrating.
Yeah, very.
But you also can't spin it and say, boy, they were great except for this game, and this game, because this game
Are
are
really important.
pretty big, huge freaking games.
Yeah.
And at Notre Dame, as we've always said, and look, and I like Jared Parker. I like Marcus Freeman. I think they're great guys. I don't like Brian Kelly. Never hidden that fact. But I'm not going to change the standard because I like these guys. The standard is the standard.
Absolutely.
And you are judged on what you do in the biggest moments. And at the end of the day, this team and this offense weren't good enough on the biggest moments. And so we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time and to be able to say it's foolish and kind of petty to just ignore and dismiss the good stuff we saw this year. It's silly. But you also can't spin it to make it to be like, but it's this greatest offense we've ever seen, and just except for those 3 games, and just dismiss those either, right? Like you need to be able to have both, because both is where the excitement should come for next year. Is like, you're so much closer now because of what you did in those 10 other games, including the Duke game. Because look, everyone's going to have those games where you don't have it that day. I mean, Washington, as good as they had, go watch the Oregon State game that they had against Oregon State. They were terrible, terrible. They needed Roma Dunze and Michael Penix to combine on a phenomenal play late in the game to win that game. We just watched Steve Angeli light that defense up. Now, again, they were missing 5 starters, but still, we watched Notre Dame light that defense up. Michael Penix struggled mightily against it. What? Had a bad day. Had a bad game. Sure. Everyone's going to have that, but can you make the plays at the end of the game to win? And they did that against Duke. They didn't do that against Ohio State. They didn't do that against Louisville. They didn't do that against Clemson. And at the end of the day, those are the games you're judged on. Yes, it was good that you did it against NC State. It was good that you did it against USC. But you've got to be able to do it in the biggest moments.
Sure.
And that's what Washington did, though, right? What was the 3 toughest games Washington played this year? Oregon, Texas. They scored over 30 points in each one of those games. Right? I mean, that look at Michigan for all the issues that Michigan had this year, right? And I still feel like this isn't a great Michigan team. I still feel that way. But when they needed to score, they scored, right? When they needed to make plays, they made plays. And it wasn't always about scoring 40 a game. Their offense struggled a lot against Alabama yesterday, but when the game was on the line and they needed to make a play, they made plays and they won the game. And ultimately, that's kind of what it comes down to, is that's what a championship offense is all about. Points per game and all that stuff is great, and it's good to talk about. But at the end of the day, can you make championship plays? Washington did that this year, right? Michigan did that this year. They were getting outplayed by Ohio State for 2.5, almost 3 quarters. But when it mattered most, their offense stepped up and made those plays. That's the difference. And that's where Notre Dame still needs to get to. And that ultimately is what the storyline is going to be. But I just don't want us to be able to be that, to be that fan base that also can enjoy the good things that we did see this season. Because in order to ignore that, you're then going to dismiss some really good stuff, some really good performances by Notre Dame players in your quest to not give any credit, to somebody you don't like. And
Jared
that's
Parker.
Petty. Jared or whoever.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam Hartman, you could have an angst against Sam Hartman. Your beef could be with whoever, and so there were some really good things we saw this year, and we'll talk about those. But that's got to be the storyline of what this season was for me, Vince, is that potential that we did see in those moments made it even more frustrating when they didn't show up in the biggest moments. Because they did have the talent. And, there were some injuries along the way, but people have injuries, right? Somebody else has got to step up and make those plays. Jalen McMillan gets hurt during the season. So Jalen Polk steps up and becomes a dude for Washington, right? I mean, that's what good teams do. And Notre Dame's offense didn't do enough of that in those big moments. Some of it was coaching, some of it was player-driven. But that ultimately is the storyline.
Sure.
But I just refuse to only focus on that, because then you miss – hey, guys, if Mike Denbrock is who we hope he is, he's inheriting in a pretty good freaking situation. And it's time to take it to the next level.
Sure.
And that's what we hope Mike Denbrock can do, and that's what we'll talk about when we get into some of the other conversations. And there's parts of the team that've got to get better. No question. Talent's got to get better. Coaching's got to get better. All of it. but man, this team is close.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that excites me, but also frustrates me when I'm looking back at this 2023 season. And I just want us to be able to have that honest conversation about the fact that there was a lot of good, but it wasn't good enough. And that's really what it was.
That's the key.
It wasn't bad. This offense sucked. No, that's insane. There's other than your emotions, there's no metric that you can look at and say this was anything other than a really good offense. It was a really good offense. There's literally no metric at all that you can point to. I mean, FEI, right? I mean, the Fremo efficiency index. Notre Dame's offense this year was 16th. That's pretty good. It's not good enough. It needs to be top 10, but still pretty good. You know, you look at 6.95 yards per play, second best all time. You know, there's a lot of good about this offense. That's exciting. That's great. This team is getting closer, right? Now it's like, okay, now let's do it when it matters most. And that's what I'm frustrated by, but also excited by, to be completely honest with you, Vince.
Well, and the team, you know, obviously we're talking offense, right? The team took a step. They took a step in the right direction. The offense took a step in the right direction. Was it the step that we all hoped it would be this year? No, it's not. But they still took a step in the right direction, and that has to be remembered. That has to be like, it's okay to be upset with maybe the overall outcome, and I get that, and I'm probably right there with you. But it's also it is also, what's the best word I want to look for here? It's not healthy. It is not
productive.
That's not the right word. Yeah, it's not a productive conversation to only focus on the fact that they didn't reach our expectation. Look, we did preview shows going into the season, Brian. We all said 10-2 is the floor. You know, we all said, you know, this is what our anticipation is. You know, 11-1. You know, that didn't reach that. That's disappointing, and it's okay to be disappointed. I'm disappointed too. It is okay, but you have to look not only at the big picture, but you also have to look at the steps that were taken. This was not a step backwards season, and anybody that says that is just sucking on the sour grapes. Like this was not a step back of a season. It wasn't. And again, kind of stealing your line, no metric that you can show me shows me that it was a step backwards.
No.
Okay. Or that it was a step parallel. This was a step forward.
Right.
It's just not as big of a step as we all wanted.
And should have been.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's not just about, it didn't meet our expectations. It shouldn't have met anyone's expectations. Like there should be no one in the program. And I'll say it again. You look at what Marcus Freeman's doing this offseason.
Right.
He's not happy about it.
No.
He's not selling. You know, it's good. It's good. It was good. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what excites me too, Vince, just for a second, is you have a head coach that you look at his team and say they went 9-3, played a really tough schedule, did a lot of good things. He's not sitting back on his laurels saying, hey, you know, we scored this many points per game, and we almost beat Ohio State.
Like, we're good.
We were right there with Clemson. Remember Brian Kelly after 2015? You know, we just got to coach a little better and play a little harder, and we're going to be fine. Marcus Freeman's like, F that. I'm pissed. They're blowing out Wake Forest 45-7, and if you only watched Marcus Freeman that entire game, you'd think Notre Dame lost by 30. If you're only watching Marcus Freeman on the sideline of the Stanford game and wasn't actually watching the game, you'd think they were playing like crap in that game. Because he's not happy with 9-3, and that excites me.
Yeah. Right.
But the exciting thing is there is something to build on. It was clearly a step forward. It's just not as big of a step as it should have been.
Right.
But, you know, it was a step forward. Now we got to see if Coach Freeman can press the right buttons to get to that next step, which we'll get into in future shows.
Sure.
But there were things that we saw this year that you know, and we'll kind of get into this next, Vince. There were things that we saw this year that should make you feel like, okay, if you can push those right buttons, you got a chance to do something here at Notre Dame.
All right. Make sure everybody, by the way, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. That's all very important. We're going to jump into the positive from the 23 season individually. And what did we see from this offense that got us excited, that was fun to watch? Because, look, at the end of the day, there were a lot of games of the 13 that I watched this season, both in person and on TV, that I really enjoyed offensively. Really enjoyed offensively. And a lot of that has to do with the way some of these guys played. And a lot of these guys are coming back. A lot of these guys are moving on to bigger and better. That's awesome. But there was a lot to like about this offense, Brian. No doubt about it. So let's talk about what went right
Yeah.
with this team.
Well, you just look at the numbers of this offense this year. I mean, you finished 7th in college football in scoring in points per game, 39.2, new Notre Dame record. You finished 9th in college football this year in yards per play, which is second best all time since the end of World War II. You talk about an offense that didn't rank as high in yards because they just didn't have a lot. They didn't run a lot of plays because they were a very efficient offense. You're talking about an offense that finished only 28th in rushing yards per game at 185.7, but they were 13th in yards per rush. It's an offense that only finished 49th in passing yards per game, but they finished 13th in yards per attempt, 15th in yards per completion. So there was a lot of good things we saw from this offense this year. And I think the biggest one, Vince, is when they were on, they were what we said they need to be. Explosive and efficient. That's what great offenses are. You're explosive and you're efficient. Now, you can be, if you have a truly elite defense, as Michigan has shown this year, you can be a championship contender and not have an explosive offense. Michigan does not have a very explosive offense this year. And that's been true all season.
Which is surprising, but you said it
because
earlier,
last year
right?
they were very explosive offensively, but they're 112th this year in plays of 30 yards or more. And last year they were 18th. Okay. But it's rare. You need a schedule like theirs that allows you to kind of cakewalk through the season.
Sure.
Right? That's basically what you need. But Notre Dame did have an efficient and explosive offense when it mattered. And when you want to talk about what didn't go right, that's where you took a step back. But there was a lot of things you saw this year that rank really well. Like I put attempts per game in there for rushing. They ranked 76 in college football this year in the rushing attempts per game. And part of the reason they didn't have as many attempts is because they were a pretty big play offense. They finished 13th in yards per rush. They were 16th in fewest tackles for loss allowed per game. It's a very good efficiency number. They were 26th in college football this year in rushing plays of 20 yards or more this season. That's pretty good. It's a very good number for Notre Dame. And when you consider that, if you look at runs of 30 yards or more, they're ranked 32nd right now. But there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of the teams that are ahead of them have played 1 to 2 more games than they have. So that factors into it as well. So this was an offense that could rip off big plays, and it was an offense that was efficient. And that's the thing that you look at when they were on. These are the things that fueled a lot of that success.
Sure.
Was that right there? Was the fact that they were a team that could go out and rip off some big plays, and they were a team that was efficient. You saw fewer negatives this year from the run game than you saw last year. Tackles for loss, things along those lines. Sometimes it was because the O-line was playing good football. Sometimes because the offensive line wasn't playing good football, but Audric Estime was just at times this season was tremendous.
He was playing good football.
And to me, that was probably the biggest storyline for me is that. That's the biggest positive that came out of the season was Audric Estime was absolutely out. Just the running back room as a whole was outstanding this year, but Audric was clearly the best. I mean, that to me that's the first great storyline of the season, Vince, is, great kid. He'd split carries to Logan Diggs last year. Could he be the guy? Could he last the whole season? Could he hold up? And he comes out this year and he rushes for 1,341 yards, which is the 5th best mark in Notre Dame history, single season. He rushes for 111.8 yards per game, which ranks 7th in college football. And I think that was 5th or 6th in Notre Dame history as well. He rushes for 18 touchdowns, which is 3rd in college football history. Now, keep in mind, Audric also didn't play a 13th game.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right. And so he has 18 rushing touchdowns this year, new Notre Dame record, finishes 3rd in college football, averages 6.39 yards per carry, which is really good for a guy that's about 230 pounds. And then, of course, he ends his career exactly how – and that's, to me, is I almost kind of feel like if he wanted to play in the bowl game, I almost would have kind of told him no, because, dude, there's no way you can replicate what you did against Stanford. Like, dude, that's the perfect John Elway win the
Right.
Super Bowl MVP and ride off into the sunset moment for you. You know, the Peyton Manning winning the Super Bowl and retiring moment for you, right? That's what that is. Rushes for 238 yards and 4 touchdowns, both fourth all-time single game records at Notre Dame, or marks for Notre Dame. Just an outstanding season for Audric. And when you know what kind of young man he is, 600-yard games, also 7th best in Notre Dame history. When you know what kind of young man he is, it makes it even more enjoyable to watch. And that's the storyline for me. Is this is a kid that has not had it easy. I'm 45 years old. I still have my mom and dad around. Thank God. Audric lost his mom when he was a little kid. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't a kid who's had things handed to him in his life. He's had to earn it, but he does it with a smile, and he does it with a lot of sweat, blood, sweat, and tears. And he ended up having just an outstanding career at Notre Dame. And you just love when good things happen to good people. And that's the thing that I'll take away is, and this isn't, it's not that it's not true for other running backs. We're just talking about Audric. And, you know, that's the big storyline for me. And he's going to he ended his career as one of the more prolific, you know, runners in Notre Dame history. You know, he rushed for 2,321 yards for Notre Dame in his career, which, looking at the mark, it's it's going to be the 11th all time, I believe, in Notre Dame history. But he did it in way fewer games than a lot of those other guys. And so if you look at his 6.2 yards per carry, only 2 backs ahead of him in the top 10 had more yards per carry than him. George Gipp and Josh Adams. That's it. I mean, Audrey Denson was 5.1. Alan Pinkett was 4.6. Vegas Ferguson, 5.2. Darius Walker, 4.7. Julius Jones, 4.8. Jerome Evans, 4.5. Sierra Wood, 5.4. Phil Carter, 4.3. And Audric did it 6.2. So the point is, if he had the same opportunities as them, he shatters the all-time mark. If he comes back for next season, you know, he's going to be a top 5 guy, right? And so just really excited, just really happy for the young man, and just a great storyline. And I felt like Audric was one of those guys that played well when it mattered most. I thought. I mean, he was huge in the NC State game. Huge in that game. I thought he ran really well against Ohio State. He makes the game-winning run against Duke. In the game, he wasn't getting a lot of touches. He played great against Clemson. I mean, like, his yards won't show it, Vince, because he only finished with like 87 yards. He had 82 at halftime. They just stopped giving the ball in the second half because the offensive line was getting dominated. But you talk about, as a whole, your offense didn't play well in big games, Vince. But Audric Estime sure did.
Well, one of my big, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but for me, if I was going to pick one of the players offensively that I was super excited to see have a great year, that's Mitchell Evans at tight end. He was a kid who I always knew he had talent, you know what I mean? But he was obviously in the shadow of Michael Mayer. What tight end wouldn't be? And he played really well in the bowl game last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Mayer was like, keep an eye on 88. Like, this kid can play. And I was like, okay, well, he's showing his guy some love, you know,
sure,
that kind of a deal. I was so sick to my stomach when he got hurt in this season. He only played 8 games, obviously, not even a full 8 games. Played 8 games, still led the team in receptions in 8 games. So that tells you the kind of season that he had. You know what I mean? And he was only second in yards by about 60.
62.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
Behind Chris Tyree.
Mm-hmm.
So 29
12 games.
Yeah, exactly. He played 8 games, 29 receptions, 422 yards, averaged 14.5 yards a catch. And by the way, some of the catches that he had this season,
were Ohio State and Duke game especially were just stupid.
It's just the highlight reel, man. Like, and you know, he blocked his butt off. I mean, he was a kid that this team is really going to need. Excuse me. Moving forward, it's going to stink. He's probably not going to be ready at the beginning of the season. But you know, he'll get back and he'll be that guy eventually. But again, another kid in the long line of tight ends at Notre Dame. And I just love watching that kid play. He is my bright spot for the offense. this season. And like I said, my heart just sank when he got hurt and he was out for the rest of the year. But he was such a security blanket, obviously, for Sam Hartman.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he blocked well overall this year. I thought he brought it every time.
What's funny is his worst blocking game was probably the best passing reception, like the Duke game. He struggled running the run block.
Sure.
But he was so – I mean, you don't win that game without Mitchell Evans. I mean, you don't. And I'll be honest, I did not see this coming. Like with Mitchell, like coming out of high school, I didn't.
Sure. Okay.
Like I'm not saying like I thought he could have a really good year because he showed me last year in the bowl game and at other times and practices and stuff like this kid's got a chance to be a pretty good player. I didn't see it coming out of high school. I didn't see this. I didn't think he'd be this good. And it was one of those ones when they landed him, you're like, why are you taking him? Yeah. Like, do you really need a second tight end in this class?
Yeah.
And then he comes out his freshman year and he plays a lot, but it's more out of necessity. There's all the injuries. He didn't catch any passes. He only caught one pass. You know, it's just, and you kept hearing from people around the program, like, look, this kid's got like day 2 NFL draft talent. I'm like, okay, I hope so. You know what I mean? Like, there's this notion people have, like, you know, you don't want to admit you're wrong. I'll gladly admit I'm wrong if I don't think a kid's good and he plays well. Like, that's silly, and that says more about you than it does me that you don't think I would do that. This is one of those kids that I didn't see this coming. And boy, has he turned out to be a heck of a player, Vince. You just hope that he can, because that's been the big knock on him since he's got to Notre Dame, is he's literally missed games all 3 years of his career. And that's the thing that, you know, and he's had 2 now, like, injuries that have kept him out of significant portions of the season because he missed a big chunk of last year because he was coming back from the injury he had in the spring.
Right. Only played in 7 games last
That's
year.
right. That's right. So there's a lot of talent, man. There's a lot of talent, and he had an absolutely breakout year. I mean, if he doesn't get hurt, there's a chance he's one of their other All-Americans. He would have not been first team because that Brock Bowers is just,
of course,
clearly first team. But he would have had a shot to be on a lot of those second team All-American lists if he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. He was really, really good this season. Yeah. And of course, Joe Alt was phenomenal this season as well, right?
And the only reason I didn't come up with Joe Alt was because it was kind of expected. Is that okay to say? Like, he was just so steady, so good. And it was just like, yeah, it's Joe Alt. He's going to be an All-American. He's going to be a top 10 draft pick, you know, and he went out and did that. Like, there is something to be said for a guy that can just go out and do it and meet the expectations.
Right.
But that's exactly what he did. He met all of the expectations, I think, that we had for him this year as far as accolades.
Which is so hard to do when you consider how high the bar was.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's almost like he earns unanimous All-American honors. And it's almost like, yeah, of course.
Right.
He should have.
Yeah.
Which is so disrespectful because of how hard that is. Yes. Like, you know, we talk about how good Notre Dame has been when it comes to producing offensive linemen, and they have. I mean, Liam Eichenberg was a consensus All-American. Mike McGlinchey was a consensus All-American. Ronnie Stanley was a consensus All-American. But look, I really became a Notre Dame fan back in 1988 is really when I first became a Notre Dame fan, right? And that was, you know, I was 10 years old. That was a long time ago. Since 1988, there have been three unanimous All-American offensive linemen in Notre Dame. That's it. 3. Mm-hmm. Aaron Taylor, Quentin Nelson, and Joe Alt. That's it. Like, it was such a tremendous season, but it got so overlooked because it was just kind of like, yeah, of course. It was just the most assumed great season ever. And the thing is, sometimes guys can have great reputations. They play good football, but not necessarily great football, and they still get all those accolades.
That happens at offensive line a lot.
Especially because there's no statistics to show it was a down year.
Right.
You know, like Caleb Williams had a down year. How can you make that case? Well, okay, here's what he did throwing the football this year compared to last year. You know, he threw for 900 fewer yards, 12 fewer touchdowns, same amount of interceptions on 112 fewer passes. You know, there's all these metrics you can use to point to why he had a down season. Still very good, but why he had a down season. With offensive linemen, you don't have those metrics.
Correct.
And then when Notre Dame's out here top 10 in scoring offense, top 10 in yards per play, blah, 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 you're going to give him a lot of credit. But it wasn't because of the reputation. He earned it. He was the best offensive tackle in college football this year. Now, there was like about a 2-game stretch where I didn't think he played very well. for his standard, but it was more. I felt it was more because how bad the rest of the line played. Duke and Louisville were those two games, but I felt like he was hurt by just how bad the rest of the line played.
Sure.
And it impacted him. But man, after that, he went right back to being dominant, and he was just a tremendous player for Notre Dame and earned every accolade he got this season. And he just did it in such an unimposing manner, just a quiet, do your job, calm, baby-faced assassin. I mean, that's what Joe Walt is, man. Like I told you a story about Angela saw him at Mission Barbecue, right? And she's like this mountain of a human being walks up next to me. And Angela's not short. She's
sure
pretty decent height for a female. She's like 5'6", 5'7". She goes like this. And, she's on the sideline of every Notre Dame game. So it's not like she's not around large human beings. And she's like, I've never seen anyone that big before, right? And then she goes, and then I get up and she goes, it's not what I was expecting to see.
Yeah, right.
Like, the face didn't match the body. You know what I mean? Because I've said this before, him and Mitchell Evans, if you only see him from the face above, look like 16-year-olds.
Yes.
I mean that as a compliment. They have baby faces.
Yeah.
But he's just and he became such a more physically punishing player this year. Joe did. And he was outstanding. He was definitely one of the bright spots. And just overall, too, Vince, looking at the offense this season, just there was a lot of young talent that emerged this season. Rico Flores had a quality season. Not as good as I think some people think it was because he got force-fed the ball way too much.
Yes.
But Jaden Greathouse comes out first half of the year, looks like he's going to be a breakout star before the injury. I thought finished the season pretty well. And then Jordan Faison comes out of nowhere against Louisville. First catch of his career, goes for a touchdown, and he was outstanding the second half of the year for Notre Dame this year. I mean, and then of course he finishes the season on an incredibly high note. But when you think about it, when you look at the total numbers this year, Jordan Faison finished fourth on the team in in receiving yards. He averaged 16.95 yards per catch and was tied for second on the team lead in receiving touchdowns behind Jaden Greathouse, who led the team in receiving touchdowns, and only played 7 games.
Right.
He didn't
literally
play
the second half of the
until
season.
the Louisville game.
Yeah.
So that's a bright spot. So, and now you look forward to next year, Faison and Greathouse both come back, and you start getting excited about what they can be.
Sure.
And then at running back, we saw some flashes of brilliance from Jeremiah Love this season. We saw flashes from brilliance from Jadarian Price this year, coming back from the Achilles. And people ask me, like, why didn't Jadarian play more this year? I'm like, that's the plan for Jadarian Price went perfectly this year. You hope you don't have to rely on him too much because, again, he's coming back from the Achilles. You don't want to overwork him from a volume standpoint. Get him some touches, let him show his explosiveness, and he did just that as a running back and a kick returner.
Right. And you can tell he was healthy in the bowl game because they let him eat a little bit more. And he was able to make some explosive plays.
Exactly.
And, that kind of a deal.
Exactly.
So right.
Great reads. And
yes, he peaked at the right time.
Right.
Yeah, for him.
And so your 3 young running backs, I thought, were really good this season. And what he'll never get talked about as much just because I love the kid, but he just doesn't have the God-given ability of the other 2. But even when you look at Jabron Payne, Vince, that kid did some nice things this season.
Sure.
I mean, the catch he had on the touchdown against USC, that was a heck of a catch. And the ball was high, it was behind him. And he went out and made a tough catch on it. But when you look at we just got done talking about how good Audric Estime was, right? And how he had a great season and all that, and he did. But those 3 running backs, Vince, this year combined for 825 rushing yards as number 2s.
Yeah.
And when you look at their production on the entire season, I'm kind of doing the math right here. They finished with 1,025 yards of total offense this year.
Okay.
Think about that. Your backup running backs. I'm not even talking about the 300-plus yards that Jadarian Price had on kick returns. And then the 80-plus yards that Payne and Love had on kick returns. Now you're getting up to like almost 1,500 total yards, right? But just offense. Those 3 kids combined for over 1,000 yards of offense this season. That's another positive. So you're talking about your backfield, your running backs produced over 2,300 yards of offense this season. Just backs. That's a bright spot.
And then you add in the volume of the returning
exactly
soon to be sophomore wide receivers.
Impactful. Well, and yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? You add that. That's another 1,000 yards and almost 10 touchdowns.
And that group produced in the return game.
Right.
Jadarian
Absolutely.
Price with the big kick return against USC. That was a big moment. USC had just cut it to 31-20
Sure.
and a 2-score game. And again, with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, that's not a place you want to be.
Sure.
And Jadarian is like, "Don't worry about this. I got this."
Right.
Beep, beep,
Right.
touchdown.
Right.
Right. So that's the things. There were so many positives that come out of this season in that regard, Vince. When you look at just the young talent that Notre Dame had, and then of course the veterans, for the most part, the veterans were as good as they were supposed to be when healthy.
Sure.
When Jaden Thomas was healthy,
yeah, absolutely.
he
number
was
one.
pretty good this year.
He was the
He
number
was
one
pretty
receiver.
good.
Yeah, agreed.
First 3 games of the year, didn't play well against NC State, had that drop, and then got hurt the next week, or 2 week, 2 weeks later got hurt against Ohio State. But I mean, everybody has off games, but he was 4 to 5 catch guy, 60 plus yards. I mean, he was like he went for the bowl game was, the bowl game was like about the epitome of a Jaden Thomas game. 4 catches for 59 yards. I mean, that's who he is. That's who Jaden Thomas is. I mean, you look at him before he got hurt, 4 for 62, 4 for 63, 4 for 62, and then he's hurt and only catches 5 balls the rest of the way. Right. And then 4 for 59 for a touchdown in a bowl game like that. It was the most Jaden Thomas stat line ever. You know what I mean? It was just like, and dude just does the job.
That's who he is, and that's who they need him to be, next year too.
Right. So, so a lot of the veterans, the returning veterans, did what you needed them to do. Not all. Joe Walt, everything you want him to be, and then some. Audric Estime met and then exceeded expectations. Jaden Thomas, before the injury, did what you need him to do. So those were the positives. And then, of course, the emergence of the young talent is something to be very.
Yeah, and I would also say all of the production you had from the tight end position, all is coming back as well. And I think that's a positive.
No, not all of it. Holden Stace isn't coming back.
Oh, I apologize. I forgot about State. I was thinking of
I get you.
Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan and Flanagan. You got those 3 guys all coming back. You're right. Holden Stace was an important part of this offense, especially early on. Made some really great plays at the beginning of the season.
Well, he was huge in the NC State game.
Yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
you can't he was disappointing after that. Agreed. But you can't take away that. I mean, right. And if Davis Sherwood comes back, you're talking about at tight end, you do return 337 catches next year. Plus here, I'm going to go, I'm just doing a little bit of math here. You return 37 catches for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns next season at tight end. That's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty, 4 touchdowns, excuse me. That's pretty good production.
Right.
Especially when you consider your dude only played 8 games.
Right.
This season.
Exactly.
So, and they didn't target the tight end position as much after Mitchell got hurt.
Correct.
So, yeah, to your point, I mean, there was a lot of production that will be coming back next season. So that's the kind of what went right for Notre Dame this year. But again, there's some what went wrongs as well, and that's what we got to focus on too, Vince. And to me, I know where the conversation is going to start for a lot of people. It's a quarterback, but for me, it's not. That's not the starting point. It's the offensive line. That to me was probably the biggest disappointment for me, especially after the Ohio State game, because I thought the offensive line played pretty good against, and
they were ascending.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then just the bottom fell out after that game. Just the very next week was one of the worst offensive line performances I've seen in an individual game since 2007. I mean, it was that bad. It was worse than 2021. It was bad. I mean, they just not only did they play poorly, they physically got beat up. I mean, how many you see Zeke Correll getting driven into the quarterback. You see Joe Walt get tripped up by his own lineman because he gets driven into the backfield, and then Joe gets put on skates because he gets tripped up by his own guy, and it looks like your All-American tackle got pancaked, but he didn't. He got tripped by it was the Louisville game. They play terrible. And then you finally get rolling. You hit this big play to Mitchell Evans, and you're down 17-10. That gets you deep into Louisville territory, comes back because illegal hands to the face. And you're just like, it was just like that all year. And but the Duke game to me was the beginning of it, and they never really got out of that funk. until you saw the changes.
Until and the changes were by injury. I mean, the
Right.
changes were because of injury, not because of
Right.
yeah, it's time to make a change because we're not getting it done, which is a little disappointing, I will say. I mean, it's a little disappointing. You're hoping those guys could get back to the level that they were at the Ohio State game, but at some point you need to be like, okay, well, clearly this isn't happening, so a move needs to be made. And I would say that I agree with you. Once they inserted those two new guys, now you had rookie mistakes. Don't get me wrong, that there were rookie mistakes, but how do I want to say this? It injected a little bit of faith that I might have lost in the development, at least, of the offensive line, from a depth
that's very
standpoint.
fair, Vince.
You know what I mean? Because I was worried. I was worried there for a little while. And then they insert these two guys, and it's like, oh, okay, they've actually been preparing these guys. They're actually developing these guys, and that was really good to see.
Yeah.
And moving forward, there's going to be some battles on this offensive line. I hope there's nothing that's just given moving forward. I want battles. You know what I mean? I want these guys, because clearly there is talent, and we know there's talent. We know there was talent that came in, but is it getting developed? I think it is.
Yeah. Well, that is why the end of the season changed my view a little bit.
Sure, exactly. Yes.
Because I thought Joe Rudolph did a very poor job developing the starting offensive line.
Right.
Very poor job.
And considering I thought he made some interesting decisions on who was going to start in the first place, too.
Agree. He should look. Biggest mistake he made all year was not playing Billy Schrauth right away.
Agreed.
He should have had 13 games under his belt, even if it wasn't as a starter. We said this in fall camp. Even if you don't think he's ready for 60-plus snaps a game, I understand. You need to play him. You need to rotate him in the game.
Yes.
And the unwillingness to do that was a mistake.
It's disappointing.
And you saw Blake Fisher regress. You saw Zeke Correll regress. And there just were a lot of issues that you had that looked like just not developing a unit that you inherited from one of the best in the business.
Yeah.
And you wondered, like, okay, is he just not the guy? That's a very fair thing to ask. And it felt a lot like what we saw with the D-line last year, which was Al Washington inherits this unit with a lot of dudes coming back. He's got an All-American defensive end coming back, and this guy. And he's going to live up to expectation. That's some flashes. Foskey goes out, and he's a consensus All-American. But you're like, but his play took a step back. He wasn't as good as he was the year before. And then you start hearing some things about, maybe there wasn't as much buy-in or whatever the case may be. And then he comes out in year 2 with younger players, more unproven players, and the D-line's just way better. Is that what we're going to see with Joe Rudolph in the offensive line? I'm not saying there wasn't buy-in. It's not that at all. It's you can be bought in, but you're not just going to ignore what you learned from Harry Hiestand. So I'm not saying this is like a negative, like there was something there. But younger players tend to be more locked in with the coach that's new because they don't have the long history that these guys have or the reputation of Coach Hiestand. And so things will maybe sink in a little bit more. And so when you watch the development of young guys like Ashton Craig, Billy Schrauth, and then, of course, in the bowl game, Tosh Baker plays at a really like the most consistent we've seen him play.
Ever.
That's a positive for me. That's a veteran that played well. And then you see what Charles Jagasol does. And then you watch the backups come in. And I thought Sam Pendleton was great.
Yeah.
I thought Selvin Absher looked good. I mean,
they just mauled guys. They were just mauling guys.
Yes. And so you're like, okay, the kids that have spent as much time with him as Coach Hiestand or more are balling out. So maybe the buy-in is and maybe it was they were always bought in, but it just took them a while to figure it out. That could be it too.
Yeah.
But the point is they finished the season well.
Right.
There's no doubt. And we could have talked about that at the beginning in the first part of what went right. But
there was too many games that it wasn't great.
Way too late.
Yeah, exactly.
Way too late.
Yeah, it belongs
in my
here.
opinion.
It belongs here as a whole. As a whole, it belongs here. But I would also say from a, if we're doing like the stock up, stock down, or however you want to phrase it, I do feel like the arrow is pointing in the right direction, at least going into the offseason from a competition standpoint, from a, if these guys are really going to compete, and this is what we saw from the quote unquote backups that were the first team, in the bowl game, and then the backups that came in. If there's some legitimate competition there and they're not just going to give jobs away to certain guys, then I feel really good about where this offensive line is trending. Like they're trending in the right direction. Now, a lot of questions still for me from a who's going to win the job and how they win the job. That's still a question mark for me. And we'll see how that goes.
We'll have a lot of offseason to discuss that. But
100%, 100%.
You need your offensive line to be better.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk a lot about quarterback play coming up here in a second. But at the end of the day, in some of those big moments, the quarterback didn't have the time he needed to make the plays he needed in some of those big games, in my opinion. And Marcus Freeman has said, we're going to be an O-line driven and D-line driven football team. Well, the defense was great this year, all year. And a lot of that was because of the D-line. And the Duke game was the first time that we saw Al Golden really turn that D-line loose.
Agreed.
He took a little bit of a step back from that against Louisville, and then the rest of the year he just kind of let him eat, just let him go. And it was great. Now the O-line's got to step up and be better. But it wasn't what it should have been considering the experience and the talent that they had.
Yes.
And not that it was going to be like a great Joe Moore award-winning group, because I don't think the talent at guard was great, especially Pat Coogan, great try-hard guy. Zeke Correll's never going to be the guy he could have been before all the injuries, but he still should have been better than what he was this season.
Agreed. Because we've seen him better. We've seen him
last year.
Yes.
We've seen him better.
Exactly.
Like the last 8 games of last year, he was a much better player.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things that went into it, and the fact is they just weren't good enough this season. And moving forward, they're going to have to get better.
Right.
Of course, but the next one is the one that people are going to want to talk the most about.
Oh, I've got the comment section blocked, and I see the number that it's sitting at for new comments. I'm curious to see how fast it jumps up, without even reading the comments. Yeah. But we're going to talk Sam Hartman. We're going to talk quarterback. And it is in this section because I think overall, and there's reasons for it, and we're going to dive into some of those reasons, but he didn't meet expectations.
Right.
He overall, he didn't meet the expectations that we all had and that Notre Dame had. And I'm sure that he had
Sam
for himself.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but he didn't meet those expectations. So he falls into this category. Now, I do feel like there are multiple reasons for this. Some of them are Sam driven. Some of them are player driven around him. Some of them are scheme driven as well.
And coaching driven. Right.
Yeah. Scheme and coaching to me are very, a similar category, but yeah, I mean, I think you can take out of each one of those pots reasons for him not meeting those expectations.
Yeah, all those ingredients combine one nasty stew. I mean, that's what it boils
a good
down
way.
to.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah, but Sam's season is the epitome of the Notre Dame offensive season.
Yes.
When it was good, he was really good. Like some of the comments that we have to our show on Saturday, because apparently we didn't bow to the altar of Steve Angeli enough in our show, and it was the best quarterback game we've seen all season.
No, it wasn't.
No, you're showing your bias in that comment, and you're anti-Hartman because like Navy, he was brilliant. NC State, he was really good. Central Michigan, he was really good. Pittsburgh, he starts off bad and then plays great. Wake Forest, he was excellent against Wake Forest. There were times this year when you're like, that's the Sam Hartman that we thought was coming. And after the first 4 games, I mean, his numbers were insane.
Yes, they were.
I mean, he was sitting there completing over 70% of his passes, averaging over 11 yards per attempt. He had 13 touchdowns in 4 games and was just throwing the ball. And he had 15 total touchdowns because he had 2 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. We're talking about Heisman. I mean, there's all these conversations that are happening because he's putting up big numbers. And Notre Dame had scored over 40 points per game for 4 straight games for the first time like 100 years, something crazy like that, right? And then the Ohio State game happened. And you started to see some of the limitations in Sam against those teams. And then the Duke game happens. And then the Louisville game happens. And then you start to say, and then the final piece, the final straw was the Clemson game. And you just saw that for whatever reason, the kid that we saw last year at Wake, the gunslinger that would throw the ball and all this other, was just not who Notre Dame got.
Agreed.
And early in the season, it was because the receivers were getting open and he was making the throws, and it was really good. But when he needed to make plays, he just didn't make a lot of plays. And like we pointed out one in the bowl game, this is what's funny about some of the comments is one of the things we pointed out about the bowl game was Steve made some throws that you look at and you're like, that wasn't a great throw, but it was a great throw because he gave his guy a chance to go make a play. I mean,
Right.
as a coach, there's a lot I'm criticizing about the ball he threw to Jordan Faison, the second deep ball to Jordan Faison. Ball
The one that
placement wasn't
rattled
where it
around.
needed to
Yeah.
be. But it's like, but I love the throw because he gave his guy a chance to make the play.
Right.
Sam wasn't willing to do that this season nearly enough. And that's what we're going to remember. And then, of course, the one big knock we had at Wake was in the big games, he was very turnover prone. And we saw that this year as well. And the Clemson game was probably the most frustrating because you're just breaking down that film, Vince, and you're just like, there's dudes open.
Mm-hmm.
You got to throw the ball.
Right.
I watched you rip this same secondary up last year for 330 some yards and 6 touchdowns, and you're just not willing to make that throw. Now, part of it is the relationship. He had been
absolutely.
with A.T. Perry for 4 years. He'd been with Jamal Banks for 4 years. He'd been with Taylor Moran for 4 years, Keyshawn Williams for 3 years, and he'd been in that system for 5. And there just was a second nature to it. I get all that. And that to me is where I felt like the job Gino Guidugli did developing Steve Angeli, a lot like Joe, was pretty good. The job he did getting Sam Hartman to play at his best, not very good. And so you've got that weird balance that we need to talk more about. And like even the Stanford game, it's like the numbers were 10 yards a catch, 140 yards on 8 completions, but it's just like, dude, there were so many opportunities there for more plays, bigger plays. Yeah. His unwillingness to throw to certain players and his obsession throwing it to others.
Yes.
And some of it earned. Mitchell Evans, I get it, right? I get it. I understand you want to throw that guy all the time because he makes you look good. And every quarterback likes that guy. But then there's why do you keep throwing to Rico Flores when it keeps resulting in turnovers? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand this. When other guys are open.
Right.
Those things were just a little puzzling to me. And so he very much signified this offense as a whole. When he was on, dude, he would light you up. But when he wasn't, not only wasn't it championship level, it wasn't even good.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the offense. It's not that they didn't play championship level in those games. Like, you lost Ohio State 27-24. No, you weren't even good you weren't even good in that game. You scored 14 points. You got stopped twice on 4th and 1 in their territory. That's just not good. Louisville game, you were terrible. Clemson game, just below average. And a lot of it came down to your quarterback was not able or willing to make plays. And the play that's going to stick in my craw more than any other was his unwillingness to put his shoulder down and pick up that first down on 4th and 1, the first 4th and 1.
He stepped out of bounds.
Yeah. I mean, just
like
stretch the ball out. I mean, just something. You got to want that.
Right.
And that's the one that will always come back to me as the one that you just look at and say, did he really, really, really want it or not? I don't want to get into a certain person's soul, but the product on the field was one that was like, either he didn't want it or he just wasn't capable of it. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't good enough. And I look back and I should have gone with my gut, Vince. My initial thought on Sam Hartman was system quarterback. I don't love the pickup. But then I got in the film and you see certain things that you really like and you hear how they're going to use them and you're just like, okay, all right, it's going to be good. I'm on board now. And it wasn't. Now, I still think they should have made the move. He still gave you the best chance to win 9 games this season.
Sure.
Because I don't know that you beat NC State with Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchie on the field. I don't know that you beat Duke with those guys on the field. I don't know that you win all the games you win with those guys on the field. But clearly it wasn't good enough to win the games where you needed him to put the team on his shoulders a little bit like Michael Penix does, right? And look at a lot of the best quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, Bo Nix.
They're able to do that. Bo Nix, right, exactly.
All those guys. Yeah.
Right. And so he just wasn't able to do that. And that's part of the reason The offense just wasn't good enough in the biggest
Right.
moments.
Yeah,
The
it was
O-line and the
disappointing.
quarterback were not.
Yeah.
What's the one theme, right? Louisville, Duke, quarterback, O-line, not good. Clemson, quarterback, O-line, not good. The only exception to that is the Ohio State game, because I felt the offensive line played well enough to beat Ohio State that day.
Right. Agreed.
Quarterback didn't, and
Yep.
that's really what it boiled down to.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, and you said, whether he was unwilling or couldn't do it. I mean, to me, he was unwilling. Like that to me, that's what I saw, because I've seen him make those plays. I've seen him do those things, whether it was at Wake Forest or even at Notre Dame at the beginning of the season. I've seen him do those things. Remember those first 4 games, and you can talk about the competition level all you want. To me, that has nothing to do with the fact that he was spreading the ball around. It's like 11 different receivers a game. Like it was whatever these astronomical numbers were. He was spreading it around. He was doing all these different things. And it doesn't matter who you're playing against. If you're willing to do that against team A, you should be willing to do that against team B. And it doesn't matter how good that team is, because against team B, those same guys were open and the ball wasn't going there. And so for whatever reason,
NC State was one of those teams, though, Vince, right? And that's what's so
Yes.
frustrating. I mean, even with the terrible USC bowl game, when half their defense didn't play, they still finished 20th in college football this year in defensive passer rating this season. And Sam threw 4 touchdown passes against them and 286 yards. Right? I mean, to your point about early in the season, but
Right.
then that from Ohio State
went
on,
away.
it just disappeared.
Just completely went away. And to me, whether it was, some of the injuries that happened throughout the wide receiving core, okay, like you can make a lot of excuses, you can come up with different reasons, but the bottom line to me, he just wasn't playing the same way that he played at the beginning of the season. Just wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he can do it because I've seen it. Whether you talk about lowering the shoulder, whether you talk about taking those shots down the field, I've seen it. I saw it in a Notre Dame uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't see it the second half of the season. And that was the most disappointing thing to me, because I don't believe that it was a physical limitation. I really don't. It was a mental limitation. And I don't have the answer to that, because I'm not Sam Hartman, and I'm not Sam Hartman's dad, and I don't know those answers.
Well, and we've got to be honest too. Like, here's a comment from Anthony Solomon, trying to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate, and I appreciate that. From Anthony. He says, to be fair, Penix is in the offense for a second year. We will never know about Sam and Riley developing due to 1-year rentals. Yeah, but if you go back and look, Michael Penix threw for 4,600 yards last year, and Washington went 11-2.
Right.
Like, Washington came out of nowhere. No, guys, there's a reason they're the only team I got right in my playoff picks. They're the only one I got right. I had Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State, and Washington. Washington's the only one I got right. Why? They were 11-2 last year. Their biggest loss was by 8 points. They lost back-to-back games in the middle of the year, and Michael Penix threw for over almost 5,000 yards. It wasn't out of nowhere, but it's a different circumstance, because he had been in that system his whole career, or half his career, because he played it against him in Indiana. So
that's why
Michael Penix being in year 2 isn't really the comparison to make. And there were also other quarterbacks that have gone to a place for 1 year and performed well. It's just, I think the lesson learned is going to be, if you're going to get a quarterback out of the portal, he needs to be more of a natural playmaker that can still make plays if the timing isn't where it needs to be. Because there is some validity to what Anthony's saying, is you can only have a relationship that goes so far in 1 year working with receivers.
Sure.
It's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which is why I think the lesson that they learned was, let's go with more of a playmaker.
Sure.
At quarterback, because Riley Leonard doesn't always need to be on the same page as those other guys, because he can go make plays with his legs and things along those lines. And so that's part of it too. And you look at a lot of the 1 year guys that have performed well. A lot of them are mobile guys. A lot of them are guys that can make plays with their legs. Because Bo Nix is another one who had a great first year at Oregon, but again, he played under Kenny Dillingham for a year at Auburn. And so it was a system he was more familiar with than others. So it is a little bit of a different situation. And then, of course, the thing that didn't help Sam, to your point, Vince, is what went on at wide receiver this year.
Right.
That was probably the biggest disappointment for me, because I had high hopes for Chancey Stuckey as a coach. Well, I shouldn't say as a coach. I didn't like the hire when they made it. We talked about that. I was a Jamarcus Shepard guy. But I said, hey, look, hopefully it pans out. He did some nice things his first year, and I had high hopes because of his professing faith and things along those lines, which was attractive to me. He was such an incredible disappointment as a coach and as a person, and it impacted the entire. I mean, look, there are reasons, in my opinion, there are multiple reasons why the offense just looked like they were playing confident and having fun in the bowl game. There's a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah.
One of them, to me, is that cancer was removed from the football team.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but the lack of development, the lack of playing the right guys, the lack of building up your players, the lack of building up trust, all the things that are very important to an effective receiver room were all gone this year. And he's gone, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I'm just going to get pissed off. But I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad that cancer was removed. From what I've heard of Mike Brown so far, we're not going to have those same issues. This is a pro. This is a guy that knows what he's doing. It's a guy that understands the importance of the relationship and all those type of things. So but that did not help Sam Hartman this season. When you're not putting the right guys on the field in the right spots, when you're not doing what the offensive coordinator asks you to do in the game plan prep, saying when we go to this look, we want this guy here, and then you change it during the game because you want to get your guy in the certain positions, that's going to hurt everything, in my opinion. And I'm just glad he's gone.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
And you want to talk about the relationships with the wide receivers, right? And and it's kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, but when you spend all week working on something and throwing to certain guys and doing certain things, and then all of a sudden that's not what you're seeing on game day, not making an excuse for Sam Hartman, throw to the open guy. Right. But there's a reason that football games are a week apart. There's a reason that you work things in practice. There's a reason that you do things the way you do them so that you get familiarity, so you get comfortable with what you're doing, not to get thrown that curveball in the middle of a game. Like right. I know maybe that doesn't sound like it's a big deal to a lot of different people, and okay, that's fine. But as a football coach and as a football player, not a good one, but at least one that was there, you do rely on familiarity from practice in a game. I mean, the whole you play how you practice kind of a deal, like that's part of it.
One thing that we didn't talk a lot about, I don't even know if we talked about it at all in the bowl game, also was we'd see Jeremiah Love get in the game and kind of be in there for that series for the most part. We'd see Jadarian Price get in the game and be in there for that series until maybe third down. We saw that more with the receivers as well. Kind of had to. You know what I mean? That, to me, the way that they just rotated guys after every freaking play didn't help either. It didn't help with a lot of the continuity either.
Yeah.
And, Sam's like, okay, one play you make this call, the next play you got completely different skill players on that's going to hurt the quarterback too. Yeah. When you're just like mass offensive, I got a new running back, new tight end, 2 new receivers on the field for my less play. And then I'm going to have a whole new group on the next play or 2 plays later.
That's tough to get used to.
And they're very different skill sets. I'm taking out Tobias Merriweather and putting in Enrico Flores or vice versa. Those are 2 completely different players with completely different skill sets.
Right.
And it just was one of those things where it's just like, man, these, it was very weird. It was very weird.
Yep.
And that's why the guys weren't getting the balls enough.
Right.
Because like we said, look, it wasn't as much as last year, but there were receivers getting open this year. And people tell me that other people say that they weren't. I don't really care what other people say. I'm just telling you what I saw. And I've put it on the board. I've put examples on the board. There were guys getting open. The ball just has to come out. But they're not getting open by 8 yards.
Right.
And it's open by 2 steps against Clemson. Well, that's as open as you're going to get against Nate Wiggins. But if you don't have confidence in your receivers, you're not going to make those throws. And that's basically what it boiled down to. There just was a clear lack of confidence for whatever reason in each other on offense. And that was the thing that if you want to talk about something to take away from what Steve Angeli did, that's it right there.
Yeah.
There was a confidence in the playmakers, get them the ball and let them go do what they need to do. That's what a quarterback is supposed to do.
Yep.
Right? To win a championship, however, you need a quarterback that can also then put a team on his shoulders. And we just didn't see that from Notre Dame this year against the better teams. And that's just basically what it boiled down to for me as far as the what went wrong.
So that's what went right. It's what went wrong. We're going to jump into another part here in just a second, what the future may look like. But make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, give us a 5-star review, jump on the boards right there, boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of your breaking news and, interesting tidbits. That's what we're going to bring to you. So now, Brian, let's talk about kind of the future. Let's go position by position, kind of where Notre Dame stands.
Let's set the premise of what this means.
Yeah. Okay, go.
Right. Like, no, you go ahead. I don't want to just jump into position. I want to kind of explain, like,
right.
Basically, it's like based on where the team ended the season,
right.
who it was in 2023, where does Notre Dame need to get better looking forward to 2024 to be a team that is capable of competing for a championship because of the offense.
Right.
And it can turn around quickly. I mean, Washington went from 4-8 to 11-2 to 14-0. Michigan went from an absolute disaster during COVID year where they punked out on the end of the season, didn't want to play Ohio State, to now they're Ohio State's daddy. And they're the Big Ten's daddy. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, just like that. Right? So in today's era, with portal, with coach, I mean, you can turn things around quickly. Very quickly, including a team like Notre Dame. So where are they short? And so we'll talk kind of scheme and overall coaching wise, and then we'll kind of go position by position, and then play and players and coaches will kind of be the focus. And we'll briefly hint about whether things are getting addressed, but we're not going to dive full into the 2024 roster and all that. That'll be for future shows. But just and it'll kind of give us some insight into why maybe they're making some of the moves that they're making or why they aren't making certain moves.
Yeah.
And go from there. So let's just start, Vince, and I'll let you kick it off. Just overall offensive coaching.
They're heading in the right direction.
There were some good things. Well, looking at 2023.
Okay.
The unit to me as a whole was simply not good enough.
Yeah.
Now, we can debate Jared Parker and whether or not he was going to get better. And you know my stance with Jared Parker. I saw some things I really liked this year. I was looking forward to seeing what he could do in year 2. But as a whole, the coaching wasn't good enough. You didn't have a coordinator who was able, for whatever reason, could have been the head coach's fault, could have been his fault, could have been whatever, to get everybody on the same page until it was too late. Right? That's the biggest flaw that I saw. Offensive line preparation wasn't good enough. Receiver coaching was terrible. And you couldn't get your veteran quarterback to play like you expect a veteran quarterback to play.
Well, so just personnel usage was not great. We kind of touched on that in the last segment. And that's coaching. I mean, the kids aren't deciding who's going in and who's not going in and how that works, right? And I think that did affect things in a negative way as well. They're gonna have to work on that.
Yeah.
The way that they're just subbing incessantly.
Yeah.
That was too much for me. That was too much. So you're right. From a coaching standpoint, it wasn't good enough. But moving forward, that's how we're doing this, right? It's what they were and then what's moving forward. There's already been 2 changes. One forced, one not forced, I guess is the best way to put it. But either way, the end of the day, both upgrades. Yes. in that department.
Right. And
so I mean that's what we're looking at moving forward in my opinion.
Well, and then you look at you've got one of the best running back coaches in the business. I'm encouraged by the things Gino Guidugli did with the young quarterbacks, even though I'm discouraged by what he did with Sam Hartman.
I will say though, there were some times now there were times when they showed him on the sideline when Sam was coming off. Gino was pissed.
You can be pissed all you want.
No, I get it.
You have your job to get him. Exactly.
I get it.
You're not doing what you need to do to have him ready to play on Saturday.
Sure.
At times. Right?
Sure. I'm the only point that I'm making is it's not like he was allowing it to happen. He was trying, but he wasn't able to. He wasn't able to impart whatever it was he needed to impart.
Right. Which is kind of allowing. I get I get what you're saying. Like he wasn't accepting of it.
There you go.
He wasn't excusing it. He wasn't okay with it.
Right.
But it's still kind of your job to fix it.
Yeah, no,
but
I get
it's not a magic wand, though, where you just wave your magic wand and the guy does what you need him to do.
Right.
Right. And so that's why I say, like, look, whatever anyone's opinion of Steve Angeli is, and he's the latest guy we're going to all argue about all offseason. The one thing we should all be on the same page upon, when you look at where Steve Angeli was in the blue gold game and really all spring, which was not very impressive, to be honest, to where Steve Angeli was in late November games coming off the bench and where he was in his first start, that's a lot of growth. Now, Steve gets credit for that because he's putting in the work, and every player gets some level of credit because they've got to actually embrace the coaching.
Sure.
But you also have to give Coach Gaduli credit for that, because of his ability to work and develop your backup quarterback. That was a problem for Notre Dame for a long time. Could you get the backup quarterback ready to play, especially as a young guy? And the way that Steve Angeli played in the bowl game, you'd have felt like they had to turn to him in November because of injury or whatever reason, he would have. Now, and part of that's on Steve, because with all due respect to Gino Gaduli and all the good things he did, Steve Angeli's "I'm not afraid of the moment" was something he walked onto campus for the very first day. That's there. That was just there. That's who he is, right? And we've said that since his first blue gold game, where he just like, hey, you need a game-winning touchdown, and he just kind of had this, all right, let's go do this kind of mentality. And that's always been Steve. He's always had that I'm better than you think I am mentality. And there's the moment will never be too big for Steve. Now we could argue if the talent's good enough and all that. That's a fine conversation to have. It is. But the one thing you can argue is that Steve isn't a kid that wants it and has the demeanor for it. He's already shown that. And so you don't give Gino Gaduli credit for that, but Steve's footwork has gotten better. Sure. His release point is more consistent than it was a year ago. His timing as a thrower, he was always late in the spring, in practice in the spring, in the blue gold game. He was very indecisive, not getting the ball where it needed to get to and all that. And then you watch him this season, not in backup. And then you say, well, it's backup minutes don't mean anything. There's no pressure. Well, there's pressure in the bowl game. You know, you got to win the bowl game. It's up to you. And he just came out and just was very decisive in the timing, you know, and all those type of things. And so those are all things that you give the position coach credit for, helping to get development where he needs to get to.
You know, this is going to send us on a tangent, and I apologize, and we don't need to go terribly down this road. I wonder, and this is a complete speculation on my part, I wonder if Sam Hartman accepted the coaching. Just like you said, a player has to accept the coaching. I wonder if that's the case.
I was told that Sam was receptive to coaching.
Okay.
It's just hard to break a fifth-year guy of habits he's been building for 5 years.
That's fair.
In defense of Coach Gaduli in that regard. It is hard to, you know, it's hard to break that.
That's fair.
And in some ways they did, and it's hard to get a guy like, if Steve Angeli's ever the starting quarterback, he's always going to be gutsy and all that, and that because that's just who he is. You don't need to push him to say, hey man, take that shot, take that, don't, you know, try and make that throw. He's gonna, if anything, Steve will probably be a guy that if he is the starter at some point in time, he'll probably have a couple bad turnovers early.
Right.
Because he's trying to do something that he shouldn't, and you got to rein it in a little bit. You'd much rather have that.
Yeah.
Than a guy you're like, can you please make this throw? Just try it. I swear it'll work out. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of want that gutsy young guy that'll test the limit sometimes in practice or a spring game. And I'm not saying that he'll have bad turns in a game. I'm more like thinking practice in the spring game and things like that, where you're just like, buddy, there's no need to make that throw. Like, there's trying to make a play, and then there's just you're being an idiot, or you know what I mean? Like, you don't say it like that, but you're like,
no, I know what you're saying.
No,
yeah, right.
But you want a guy like that to a degree because you can harness that a little bit more. So I you know, again, you look at a quarterback position, Vince. I mean, we'll just slide into it, man. That's just that's one big position where Notre Dame just still is not good enough, and we're gonna find out if they can get there,
right?
You know, and we'll have plenty to talk about that. But simply put, when you just evaluate this 2023 season, one of the common denominators in the moments that they weren't good enough as a team is they weren't good enough at quarterback.
Sure.
It's as simple as that. I mean,
Absolutely
not
agree.
even close to being good. Not enough playmaking, too many mistakes. And mistakes meaning not picking up fourth downs.
Yeah.
You say, well, you didn't turn the ball over against Ohio State. Yeah, you did. It's called turnover on downs. It's the same exact thing. It's no different. Him getting stopped short on 4th and 1 is no different if he would have tried to throw it to Davis Sherwood in the flats and got picked off.
Yep.
It's the same end result. The other team now has the football, right? You lost chances to skip points twice in their territory on 4th down. That's a turnover. It's literally called a turnover on downs.
Right.
And you lost points. So you add those on to the other turnovers that happened in those moments, and it just kind of builds.
Right.
And your quarterback play just wasn't good enough. And it hasn't been good enough for a long time. Will that change moving forward? No idea. I'm very high on Riley Leonard. There was no convincing for me. We've been talking about Riley Leonard in the show for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now he's got to prove it, right? I'm very high on Kenny Minchie, very high on CJ Carr. They got to prove it. Others are higher on Steve Angeli. He's got to prove it. But the point is, like, say what you want, Steve Angeli is a more talented player than Drew Pine, physically talented than Drew Pine. I don't think there's any question about that. He's bigger. He's got a better arm. He's a better athlete. There's no question about that. And, he's a guy you can go 10-2 with. But is he a guy, maybe even 11-1 with next year's schedule? Maybe. But is he a guy that you can then get into the postseason and feel like, hey, we got a shot to beat anybody because he's a quarterback? I have my doubts. If I'm wrong, great. Doesn't matter who it is. I don't have a dog in that fight.
Right.
It's I'm going to give you my evaluation, and it is what it is. You can take it or you can leave it, whatever the case may be. But the fact of the matter is they weren't good enough at quarterback this year. I think between Riley Leonard, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Deuce Knight coming down the road, there's the potential for quarterback to stop being a problem, because you look at the games this past weekend, and J.J. McCarthy was not good the first 3 quarters against Bama, in my opinion. Just wasn't good enough. Missed some throws, just, but when the game was on the line, JJ made plays. And so did Blake Corum, right? But JJ also made some plays. And Jalen Milroe did not. When the game was on the line, Michael Penix made big plays. When Texas needed Quinn Ewers to make some big plays to get them back in the game, he did. It's still quarterback driven, Vince. It's still quarterback driven. And the fact of the matter is Notre Dame is a lot closer where they need to be at every position except quarterback as far as that championship climb. That's going to be the big question mark. Do they have the horses on the roster now to do it? We'll have that conversation and we'll find out. Right. But what I do know, when I watch this 2023 team play, they weren't nearly good enough at quarterback to be a championship caliber football team.
Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. And we can think about what we think about, the roster and what these guys are going to be and what they're projected to be and all of those different things. But as of right now, the guys that have played, because we're talking about 23, this is a position that is not ready to win a championship. And we've talked about this for a long time, you and I, before Irish Breakdown, before everything. Notre Dame is a championship level quarterback away from either winning a championship or being involved in a legitimate discussion of a championship. Mm-hmm. That's what they're missing. And, in their rearview mirror, looking at 2023, they're still missing that. Whether that guy's on the roster now or will be in the future of a committed guy or however you want to say it, right? That's what they're missing. Mm-hmm. And you will see this team take a tremendous step in the right direction once that guy is behind center.
Sure.
Whoever that guy is. And I think it's funny that you said, that you don't care who it is. I don't. If you ask me the question, do I care if Steve Angeli is the quarterback of a national championship Notre Dame team or CJ Carr or Riley? I don't give a
I just don't think he is that guy.
Correct. And if
I'm wrong, great.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
If I'm wrong,
just like Mitchell Evans. Like, I did not think Mitchell Evans was going to be the player he turned out to be. And I'm happy as pie that he is.
Yes. 100%.
Because I'm a Notre Dame fan.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I don't need to hold on to evaluations that, I don't want to admit I'm wrong. That says more about you than it does me if you think that. Right. It does, because everybody gets evaluations wrong.
Sure.
They do.
I evaluated the Mike Denbrock thing wrong. Okay. So,
right.
Which,
no chance. But other people who make a lot more mistakes than you do want to grab onto that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all good. That
says more about them
than it does you.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. But yeah,
but if he is great, but the point
Right.
that's not the point. The point is whoever it is, Riley Leonard,
Right.
CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, Deuce Knight, some transfer in 2025 we don't know about yet. I don't know who it is.
Right.
But as we have seen in college football, the best way to go from being good to a champion for the most teams, Michigan's a bit of the exception because they're
Agreed.
winning in different ways. For most teams, it's you have a jump and play at quarterback.
Yep.
You take
Notre
Michael
Dame needs
Penix
it.
off that football team and put about any other quarterback in college football, Washington is not 14-0 playing for a championship.
Agreed.
Just not.
Yep.
You take Bo Nix off of Oregon and put most other quarterbacks in college football on that team, and they're not as good as they've been the last 2 years. They're just not. You know, and even JJ McCarthy to a degree, the one thing JJ did that past Michigan quarterbacks not been able to do is when stuff is breaking down, JJ can go make a play. A lot of times with his legs. And there's value to that. Even when he's not ripping you up throwing the football, there's value to that. And that's something I'm looking forward to seeing. But quarterback play has not been good enough. Running back, championship level.
100%.
Tight end, championship level. Those two positions, easy, bam, right there, championship. Yep. There's championship talent and there's championship production.
And championship depth. Correct. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Correct.
And I think that's what you meant by talent. But like,
depth of talent, sure.
Yeah.
Like next year, if Mitchell Evans is going to miss, let's say he misses the first month of the season, you're like, okay, we're gonna be fine.
Right.
And then when he comes back, he'll be fresh and healthy. Because the nice thing is like, if Notre Dame is smart, I would. Well, I shouldn't say if they're smart because I don't imply that they're dumb if they don't. I would just say I'd really like to see them be slow bringing Mitchell back.
Absolutely.
Because if he misses the first 4 games, like guy coming off a torn ACL, if Notre Dame's going to play for a title next year, they're going to have to play 16 games.
Yep. You need him at the back half.
Yes.
Not the front half.
I will sacrifice him being there. Miami, Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami, Ohio, and Stanford and A&M. If it means he's going to be even more fresh and 100% healthy for playoff game number 1, quarterfinal game, semifinal game, and title game.
Not that he's going to be ready for game 1, but Mitchell Evans is not going to be the difference as to whether you win or lose the Texas A&M game.
Shouldn't be.
I shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah,
with Eli Raridan, Cooper Flanagan, and then the receiving talent and all that. If you can't beat that A&M team who's losing half their roster and is in game 1 of a new coach's era, I don't care where the game is being played.
But
you've got much bigger issues than tight end.
But you bring him back for a playoff run, he could be one of the difference makers in that scenario.
100% correct. And if you can develop Eli Raridan to where he can be that dude while Mitchell's out, now you're in a situation where you have a 12 personnel alignment that is dynamic because teams have to account for Mitchell and Eli.
Absolutely.
And that makes you even better.
Yes.
So, but point is, Vince, to your point, there are not a lot of teams that can lose a kid that was as productive as Mitchell Evans and say, you're going to be okay until he comes back. You're going to be just fine. With Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan, you're going to be just fine. And Davis Sherwood can go in there as your third tight end and hold his own as a blocker. Yeah. I mean, he can do some things out of the H-back type stuff. And if Jack Larson's thrust into the field next year because of injuries, all right, so you have one of the kids who's a little undersized, but has some of the best ball skills that you're going to see in the 2024 class anywhere at any position, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. So
it will be interesting.
Running back same way. They were a championship caliber football team of running back this year.
Oh my gosh,
no doubt.
From an elite talent level to the depth to
production,
whatever metric you want to use, the running back room was great this year, and it will continue to be that moving forward because you are losing a great talent in Audric Estime, a great talent, and no one's saying that you're not.
Right.
But you are allowing now Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne, name them, and then you've got the incoming guys as well to kind of pick up some of that slack.
Right.
You're going to be just fine.
And that's what good teams are supposed to do, Vince. I mean, a perfect example, look at Texas.
Right.
They lost Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson from last year's team. Right? Those guys accounted for over 2,000 yards just rushing last year and 23 touchdowns, averaged over 6 yards a carry.
Right.
Jonathan Brooks comes back as their top back. He only rushed for 197 yards last season at Texas in 2022 as a redshirt freshman. He ran for 143 the year before and took a redshirt year. He had 11 career games, and he had 330-some yards coming into this season. And then Jonathan Brooks in only 11 games for Texas rushes for over 1,100 yards and is a awesome running back. 11 games. He has 187 yards, 1,139 carries, 187 carries, 1,139 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry. And he caught 25 passes for 286 yards and then gets hurt. He gets hurt against TCU and is out for the year. So what happens? You pop in freshman CJ Baxter. He starts playing more. Jadon Blue, redshirt freshman, sophomore player, starts playing more. So CJ Baxter comes in, game after TCU, after Brooks goes down, he rushes for 117 yards. And then the rest of the year rushes for almost 300 yards the rest of the way, over 300 yards the rest of the way, right? Jadon Blue comes in. He doesn't play a whole lot during the beginning of the season. He has 55 yards against Rice, -2, 14, 17, 28, 0, 0, 44, 11, 0, 18. Last 3 games, 121 in a win over Texas Tech, 33 in the Big 12 title game, and he goes 9 for 59 last night. And he also catches in the last 4 games 13 passes for 122, 27, 120. Let's see here, -7, 128 yards in the last 4 games. Right? That's what good teams do. Doesn't mean that Audric Estime's not a good player, great player. It just means when you're a good team or you're a great team at that position, yes, it's just replace and reload. And that's what Notre Dame is going to do. And they did a great job this year. This is one of the best coaching jobs they did, is you could have a kid like Audric Estime that produces the way he produced, 1,300 plus yards, top 5 all-time single season marks at Notre Dame in rushing, yards, and touchdowns, right? 7th best all-time of most 100-yard games. And you still found enough touches for your next 3 running backs who all can come back next year to have over 1,000 yards of offense. That's great coaching right there by Dylan McCullough and the offensive staff. And then, of course, the talent's got to be elite too, and it is. I mean, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are going to be the next group of players that Notre Dame fans want to argue about of who should play more.
Of course.
And I'm going to say both. Let's not do the team Jeremiah, team Jadarian thing like we did with Logan and Audric. They're both great. They're both going to play. Some days Jeremiah is going to be that dude. Some days Jadarian is going to be that dude. And other days, and it's going to be real fun when this happens, it's both of them in the same game. And I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, man, that is a championship caliber depth chart.
100%.
Back.
100%.
And tight end.
Right.
No question.
And they're going to be coached by championship level coaches too, in my opinion.
Yeah. As long as Dylan – now, if Dylan McCullough leaves, I have a lot of confidence that Mark Freeman's going to hire a guy that can do that as well. But hopefully –
But as where we stand right now –
hopefully he stays for at least one more year, because he's a heck of a football coach.
Right.
And again, develops young men. He takes a lot of pride in developing young men.
Right.
Not just football players.
Right.
But young men. And you want guys like that around as long as possible in Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Final piece.
Well, there's 2 more pieces.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We kind of talked about one, but yeah, let's go receivers first, Vince. Then we'll finish with O-line.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. With where it was in 2023, not close to good enough.
Nope.
Wasn't coached very well. Technique was terrible.
Yep.
You had guys that didn't fight for the football.
Yep.
You can blame that on the receivers coach only so much.
Right.
I don't care how bad your receivers coach is.
Still
either have that in you or you don't.
Agreed.
And there just wasn't enough of that. You had guys with talent that weren't playing with enough fire. You had guys with talent that weren't being developed and weren't being pushed in the right way. Your rotations made no sense whatsoever. Guys would make big plays, and then you'd come them out and you wouldn't see them for a series and a half.
Guys are playing out of position.
Some of that out of necessity. You know, Deion Colsey gets hurt, Jane Thomas gets hurt. Somebody's got to play boundary.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But
still.
Yeah, it was just, it wasn't good enough. And the talent was very good. It wasn't elite.
Right.
But it was way better than it should have been. So it's not as far off as we would think talent-wise in 2023. You had a lot of injuries. I mean, Thomas was banged up all year. I mean, let's be honest. If Jaden Thomas doesn't get hurt, we're not talking about Mitchell Evans leading the team in catches and yards.
100% agree with that.
Not even close.
Right.
Jaden Thomas would have. He literally caught 4 balls like every game until he got hurt.
Right.
You know, I mean, he had caught 50 passes this year.
Absolutely.
For 600 some yards. There's no question.
And that's on the conservative edge too.
Yeah, I mean
it might be one game where he just breaks
goes
out
for 90 when he goes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So that hurts. You can't just now. Jaden is not a true number one. He's not Roma Dunze. He's not Adonai Mitchell. He's not that kind of guy. But he's still a really good football player, and when you don't have him, it's going to hurt you.
Sure.
You don't have Deion Colsey, who didn't play a whole lot, comes out, only plays like 7 snaps in the first game, catches a touchdown, and then 2 other passes, including a diving catch. And then the next 2 games, they barely play him again. It's just the weirdest thing.
Makes no sense.
It's that, I mean, we say this before, at some point in time as a coach, you've got to be willing to say, this guy's just not a practice player. Right. I mean, you have to be willing to say that at some point in time when a guy has done enough in games. And it's not just what he did against Navy. It's what he did against Navy based on what he did last year when they finally played him. It's like they finally played him against Syracuse and he was open. Ryan and I talked about this. Deion Colsey could have had 10 catches against Syracuse if they'd have thrown the ball every time he was open. And he didn't play that much. And then he goes out and makes a great catch for a touchdown against USC. When they threw him the ball, he makes plays. But for whatever reason, they just didn't want to play him. Okay, I don't know what that is. I mean, and I know he's not a good practice player. I see it with my own eyes. We see him drop balls. Right. I get all that.
Yeah, no, right.
But at some point in time, you got to balance that and say, okay, we're going to have to play this kid more because when he gets on the field on Saturdays, he just goes and makes plays.
Right.
But then he gets hurt. And, could discuss if he would have come back, should have come back and all that and why he wouldn't have and all that. And that's a different conversation for a different day. And then you look at how Tobias, he had his own issues, and then the way that they handled him was wrong.
Was terrible.
You had Chris Tyree still learning a new position and not really diving into using him in a lot of the ways that he should have been used. And and then Greathouse comes off great. He started off great, and then they start putting him in positions that he's not prepared for. And then he gets hurt, and it just was a hot mess all year. And then they force feed Rico Flores down Sam Hartman's throat when Rico's a nice complimentary player that they try to make a number one. And that hurt the offense as well.
Right.
And then just a lot of other things. You've got Braylon James, making plays. I was told at one point in time the defensive coaches went to the offensive coaches and said, this kid's killing us. I mean, they're watching the receivers play on Saturday saying these kids can't stretch the field. And this kid's beating us like a drum in practice and nothing. So it was just a total cluster, all year. The talent's got to get better. It's getting there.
Right.
The coaching has got to get a lot better. I hope it's there. I've heard good things. I love what I saw in the bowl game.
Right.
And then when you look at the influx of talent, I'm not worried about receiver next year. But they got to prove it. I'm not worried about the talent at receiver next year. Now it's show me time.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with the receiving core.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not a lack of talent. I mean, I think that overall, top to bottom, the talent level, especially going into next year, is going to be the best that it's been in a really long time from a depth standpoint. I really do. And if you've got a quarterback that's willing to spread the ball around and throw it to the open guy, there's going to be open guys with the talent level that is going to be in that room in 24. There's going to be. Now, is there going to be that, that Heisman Trophy candidate type of wide receiver? I don't think so, at least not in 24. But the talent level from top to bottom is going to be good enough to be a championship level group, right? And the early returns tells me that the coaching is going to be there. Jury's still out to a degree on that, but I like where this group is trending. They can't be worse than they were overall in 23. I mean, there's injuries, there was fundamentals, there was the off the field stuff, there was all of that. They can't be they can't be worse. They cannot be worse. and I'm probably going to stick my foot in my mouth. Hopefully not moving
No,
forward.
if you do, it's going to be a long year.
Oh my goodness.
No,
So
I mean, it's fair. I mean, because we've already seen one example of it, Vince, and it was some of the best receiver play we've seen all year.
yeah, good
Competing
call.
for the ball,
Yes.
getting open, finding soft spots, good route technique, just playing with confidence. I mean, it was
Yes.
noticeably different in one game.
And the injection of talent that they're about to receive
Right.
from not only the transfer portal, but from the recruiting class is going to just swell. It's going to be a groundswell, right? Of what this group can be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No doubt.
So last group, offensive line. We kind of talked about this a little bit before, but the 23 version was not championship level.
No.
I mean, at all. They weren't. They
it wasn't even playoff caliber. I mean,
right.
Even close. It's a borderline. It wasn't terrible. It was a borderline top 10, probably top 15 offensive line. Should have been top 5, in my opinion.
Should have been.
Yeah.
Should have been. And from the talent that they're losing, obviously at tackle, even though Blake Fisher regressed this year.
Talent won't be an issue.
Talent's not the issue, right?
I mean, you're replacing Joe Walt with a 5-star, right? Experience will be an issue next year. But yeah, talent was an issue this year. I would argue this, Vince. I'm curious of your thoughts on this. I'm sorry to cut you off.
It's all good.
No one's going to be as good as Joe Walt next year. It would be unfair to even think that Charles Jagusah should be anywhere in the universe like what Joe Walt was. There's so many differences between the two of them, as far as why Joe was so much further along than most other kids are.
Right.
But left to right, I think there's going to be more talent.
Yes.
In the offensive line than there was this year from just a God-given ability standpoint.
If the best 5 play.
Even if Pat Coogan starts, I still stand by that because Pat Coogan in year 2 is going to be better.
Should be better than Pat Coogan in year 1. Yeah,
right.
Okay.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
Pat Coogan next year should be better than Pat Coogan this year if coaching is even decent, right?
No, that's fair.
I'm not even like pie in the sky, play your 5-star upside guys. I'm just saying, even if it's just the same lineup we saw in the bowl game next season, I think across the board the talent is better because I think the inside talent is definitely better than what it was this year. Just God-given ability talent, right?
Agreed. No, I agree with that.
And I think Jagusah and Baker are going to be pretty good because for all the talent that Blake Fisher has, he was a pretty mediocre player this year. Pretty mediocre. And I think that's going to be an upgraded position next year. If, and here's the big caveat, if Joe Rudolph is the coach we hope he is, then I think the offensive line should be a lot better next year for a lot of the same reasons the defensive line was better this year. Year 2 under a new coach, right? You had a coach that there was a lot of buy-in with, that it's hard to deprogram stuff that was programmed pretty well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so now you're year 2. Charles Jagusah never played for Harry Hiestand. Ashton Craig never really played for Harry Hiestand. I mean, the 1 year, but he was a scout team guy. Billy Strouth missed half of his freshman year because of injuries. So he never really played for Coach Hiestand. And so Ashton and Tosh Baker played more under Jeff Quinn than he played under Harry Hiestand. Now, this isn't meant to be at all a knock on Harry Hiestand because y'all know my stance on Coach Hiestand. I think he's the best in the business. And I would have wished he would have stayed. I'm simply making the point that the transition can be challenging sometimes when you have a coach that's as respected as Coach Hiestand is. It can actually make the transition very difficult when you've got a bunch of guys that were recruited by Hiestand, because Zeke Corral was recruited by Harry Hiestand. And then you go to what they did. So next year it's just going to be a little bit different deal. Plus now Coach Rudolph knows his players better, their strengths and their weaknesses, just like Coach Washington did. And Coach Washington went from, a question mark forget the recruiting, just as a coach, what can he do, to I thought his line played outstanding football this year. Vince, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think they did.
Yeah.
And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to see a similar year 2 jump. And the way the O-line finished the year, once the younger players were inserted, has given me so much more confidence. Like,
absolutely.
Before the weight game, I'm thinking this is a problem.
Right.
This is a problem. But when I saw how well Ashton Craig, and now there's still a lot of things he's going to have. I mean, we talked about they got to move their feet better, use their hands better. But they came along really nicely.
In the 3 games that they had, I was very impressed with how they did.
And all really the movement and stuff that Oregon State threw at them, I thought they handled it pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not just a talent thing. That's a you got to be prepared to execute thing, and made them look like they played better than they actually did. They didn't actually dominate Oregon State, but they did their job and they did it hard, and it allowed them to be effective against a pretty darn good defensive line.
They did it well enough to make the guys around them
and that's all you need.
Job. Yes,
exactly.
Right. So I want a dominating offensive line. That's what I want. Yeah. I'll be selfish. That's what I want.
And they need that if they're going to be a title team. They need that. But I'm much more optimistic about the offensive line taking that jump in year 2 now than I was before the Wake Forest game when all those changes.
It was refreshing, to be honest with you, was watching those couple guys come in. And then again in the bowl game, seeing the 2 tackles, because is it fair to say I kind of expected Charles Jagasaw to play the way that he did? I did. I mean, he kind of struggled at the beginning, got better as the game went on.
That's fair.
But Tosh Baker really kind of impressed me.
But Jagasaw doesn't do that if you don't coach him up to be mentally prepared to handle what's going to be thrown at him. Tosh was the most pleasant surprise.
Yes. I was very pleasantly surprised with the way he played. And so then when you talk about the sum of all the parts, I thought that, yes, there's some good things happening on the offensive line, whereas a month and a half ago, I might not have had that same thought process.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm with you on that.
And somebody in the chat made a point. One thing that I'm going to beg of Coach Denbrock and Coach Rudolph next year is, unless you guys are willing to make personnel changes in the middle at left guard, please stop running so much pin and pull with Pat Coogan. Please, for the love of all things holy, stop asking that kid. If you're dead set on playing Pat Coogan, that's fine.
You got to plays to
because now you're hurting strength. Pat. Yeah. Now you're putting Pat in bad spots where he's not playing a game that he's good at. Pat is a kid that you can look. Could Notre Dame put a championship caliber line on the field next year with Pat Coogan at left guard? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. I have seen lines with guys not as good as Pat Coogan be championship caliber because the talent around him is good enough.
Sure.
But you can't ask Pat to do things he's just not physically capable of doing at a high level. They've got to not do that. Now, Pat's okay on like the quick pulls. So like they can run like counter to him or away from him, meaning he's just got to be that quick kick guy. He can do that. I'm talking about the buck sweeps, the outside stuff, the screen game. He's just not going to get out there quick enough. That's just not who he is.
Agreed.
He's the guy that can quickly wrap and quickly, do the short pulls. He can do short pulls. You just can't ask him to do a lot of the long pulls and the perimeter stuff. But I was very pleased with what I saw from those. And look, and I know some people I'm seeing in the chat are still not convinced in Tosh Baker. And look, one game doesn't make your career. All these guys that haven't played a lot have a lot to prove. There's no doubt.
Sure.
Ashton Craig has a lot to prove. But the thing that gives me encouragement about Tosh is he's actually going against a really good group of pass rushers.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the top pass rushers for Oregon State played in that game. All of them. And he kept him in check. Didn't allow a single pressure the whole game.
Yeah.
And the one time he got driven back, guy got in his pads, he kind of recovered long enough to like keep the guy from getting to the quarterback. Now he's got to clean up those things and make sure he's playing with better, consistent pad level. But yeah, you're right, Vince. I was very pleasantly surprised with how Tosh Baker played.
Right.
I really was.
And it makes me even more confident about this group moving forward, to be honest with you. And again, it's one game, and I'll be the first one to admit that. It's one game. Right. But in the sample size that we had of Tosh Baker before, which is only a couple of games, it's a night and day difference. It's a night and day difference for me. So, and there's been some years of growth and development between then and now, and I totally understand that and acknowledge that, but he's clearly been putting in some work, and he's clearly been coached up too. And so that is what gives me some optimism moving forward with him at right tackle.
Yeah. I started hearing about Tosh making a jump last year under coaching Stan, that they really liked the jump he made.
Okay.
And then there was even talk this year in fall camp of maybe moving him inside the guard because they just kind of felt like he's one of our best 5.
Gotcha.
So to the Notre Dame coaching staff, it's not a surprise that Tosh played as well as he did.
Good for him.
To us, it is because I didn't think Tosh played very well in some of the times we've seen him.
Right.
But to the Notre Dame coaching staff, they weren't surprised.
Yeah.
So
Like it. Okay.
hopefully they're correct on that. And I hope that they're right about Pat Coogan if he's look, to me, as long as there's a legitimate starting battle at left guard, I don't care if Pat Coogan's starting left guard next year. If there's a legitimate battle, because if he legitimately beats out Sam Pendleton, Sullivan Absher, and when he comes back, Rocco Spindler, then that tells me Pat's ready to take his game to another level next year. If it's a legitimate battle, meaning he's got to win it to start, not the other guy has to be way better than him to get him out. But if he literally plays the best, then I'm good, because that means Pat has raised his game. It also means that they've adapted the offense to fit more better what he does.
Right.
And look, we see teams do that. So like they'll do, hey, look, we'll just do a lot of our long stuff with this side. I mean, it's a little tendency oriented, but you don't know that it's necessarily coming. And so they're just gonna have to be smart about that. But I'll just say this: Pat Coogan won't be the reason Notre Dame doesn't have a championship caliber defense next year by himself. Now, offense, because now he could be if it's one of those things where they play him even though he hasn't necessarily earned it,
right?
Or they keep asking him to do things that he's just not good at.
Right.
What I mean is, if there's a legitimate battle and Pat wins it, there's enough there with Pat Coogan. Like, Pat Coogan's not a bum. I hope people don't like. I don't think he's that great of a player based on the standard that I've set for the Notre Dame offensive line, which is championship caliber.
Right.
He did not show me that he's that guy this year enough. But there were enough moments. Like, look, I'll just say it like this. You just got to watch Ohio State game and say, if you use him correctly, Pat Coogan can be part of a really darn good offensive line that can go toe-to-toe with anybody. Right? You do it once, you can do it again.
Yeah.
It's just, you know what I mean? So I have a lot of cautious optimism about the line next year.
Cool.
Will it be as good as 2017? No. Will it be as good as 2015? Probably not. Those were elite, best in the country lines. Can it be a top 5 offensive line? Yes, and that's where it needs to be.
Right.
Because they don't have to carry the team, in my opinion, looking forward. The running back room, the tight end room, the receiver room, the upgrade in talent there, the upgraded talent at quarterback, Vince, to me, they don't have to carry the offense the way that they did in other years. Right. The offensive line. Agreed. They just have to be really good.
Agreed.
Because like you said in the bowl game, you nailed it in the bowl game. They were good in the bowl game. They weren't great. But because your running backs were,
right,
it worked.
Correct. They allowed other guys to make plays.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we saw that at times with Audric this year, where they weren't great up front. Yeah. They weren't great against some of the teams Audric went off against, NC State and others, but they just kept a body on a body and then let Audric go do his thing.
Right.
And they gave Steve time. Right. To your point. I mean, they just kind of did their job against a pretty good front, and then the skill talent took over. You just can't play. The problem this year was that they played bad at times. Right. It wasn't even like they didn't play championship caliber against Duke. They didn't play championship caliber against Louisville and Clemson. They played terrible against those teams, not by championship standard, by any metric.
Yeah.
Of how you evaluate offensive line play. They were terrible against Duke. They were terrible against Louisville. They weren't terrible against Clemson. They just weren't very good. Right? Clemson wasn't nearly as bad as those other two. So that's the thing, Vince, is you got to avoid those games.
Agreed.
And I'm cautiously optimistic that we will see that next year.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
Yeah.
The arrow's pointing in the right direction for me with the offensive line, for sure.
Yeah. Agree.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this part of the podcast. So make sure you hit the like button.
And we'll do deeper dives into 2024.
Of course.
Starting next week.
Yeah. And beyond, for that matter. I mean, and that will potentially change when we hit spring practice and we see kind of some guys running around and doing some different things, and you know how all that goes. So, but in the meantime, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, share with your family and friends, hit the boards. Boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of the latest info.
Yes, including all the stuff from the All-American Bowl. Ryan is down in San Antonio now.
Yep.
He just sent me a bunch of practice clips. We're going to work on putting that together. So Ryan will have in-person content all week from the Army. I'm just going to call it the Army All-American Bowl, guys. That's what I've always known it to be. It's just the All-American Bowl now.
Oh, I thought the Army
But
was still involved. Okay.
no, they're not.
Okay.
But he's down in San Antonio. He'll be down there all week. So he's got some video of Kingston and Cam Williams from today.
Nice.
He'll go see the East team tomorrow. That's going to have Bryce Young and Keedron Young on the East team, and then the game is the 6th. So what's that, Saturday, Vince?
The
6th is Saturday. Yeah, game Saturday.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, lots to do. That's irishbreakdown.com, boards.irishbreakdown.com. You'll get all that good stuff. Keep going.
All right. We've got some mailbag to get to. I have had the comments closed the entire time, Brian. So this is going to be all surprise to me, which I'm looking forward to. So let's do this. Aiden Benami with the super chat. Thank you very much. How about Parker retweeting Brian's article? Love it.
Well, I feel bad for Jared Parker. I do, because the criticism of him this year was not objective at all or fair.
Right.
I mean, people saw he's a terrible play caller. Well, he's had some moments, like a lot do. And like yesterday, I'm watching Kellen DeBoer, was one of the best offensive minds in the game. Like, why are you throwing there on 3rd down? Run the ball, run the clock out. You're up, you know what I mean? You're up 2 score. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? But he got no credit for all the good things that happened this year, and nothing but trashed online. And it was incredibly disappointing to see the vitriol that was thrown his way. He didn't deserve that. Did he deserve some criticism at times? Absolutely. No question. But just the nastiness that I've seen kind of grow in Notre Dame fandom in the last year is really disappointing. I thought we were better than that, and most of us are. But there were some that was just like, well, this is just really nasty, and it was unfair. So that's kind of where that came from for him, I believe, is just some of that. Now that he's gone, he can kind of defend himself a little bit, and I hope he can focus on Troy,
right,
and not let that stuff.
You know what? He's stepping into a great opportunity.
Yes, he is
at Troy. That is not a normal job opportunity, because he's stepping into a program that is like 23-4 or something over the last couple of seasons. Normally you're stepping into a rebuild, and that is not the case. And so I'm really hopeful that he's able to just kind of step in, stay the course, change some things, make it his, obviously, but then also continue with the success that they've had down there.
Well, it's like Brandon said. He goes, I like Park as a person and coach, just don't prefer him as an OC at Notre Dame. And that's fair. I mean, that's totally fine. To say that Jared Parker's not a championship caliber offensive coordinator is a very fair thing to say, because he hasn't been. Right. And even for all the good things we saw this year, it wasn't championship worthy. Otherwise, they'd be in the championship, because the defense was certainly there.
Right.
It's just so it's totally fine to say, hey, Notre Dame needed to be better at offensive coordinator. Agree. I don't think Jared Parker is a championship caliber coach. Okay, it's very fair. I'm not even going to push back against that, because he hasn't proven that he's capable of it. I may say, hey, I think he showed me some potential here, and here, and that's fine. We can have that. But like, he didn't show himself to be a championship coach this year, because the offense is the thing that kept him from there. It's the nastiness that was thrown his way.
Yeah.
Is really the thing that bothers me. Just the fact that they would just ignore anything good that happened. Like, they were scoring 39 points a game in spite of him this season. Like, this is a team that barely scored 30 points a game last year. And they come out this year and they score 39 points a game. And people are acting as if it was like by accident, or because they scored a bunch of points in a cup. Like, look, they scored 66 points against New Mexico in 2019 and 59 against Bowling Green, and still scored 3 less points per game than this year's offense did. Against a schedule in which Notre Dame went 10-2 that year and beat one ranked team all year, and that was Navy. Much weaker schedule than what they faced this year. Right? But hey, here's the deal. It wasn't good enough. And it's okay to say that. But you can say that without just turning it into just god-awful treatment. And that was the disappointing thing. It's just
agreed.
And maybe it's just a Twitter thing. Maybe it's just that, and it could be that.
Part of it. I mean, it's part of it.
But
But it was also very evident in like text messages I would get and things like that. But I think a lot of that's what makes me Twitter. But yeah. I mean, it's
Well, because that people follow some of those
for sure.
accounts that say that ignorant stuff.
Right. And
And
Twitter's the real world. So
no, it's not.
people
Don't
follow
even say
that.
that jokingly.
Oh, Iden with another super chat. Thank you very much. 4 roster spots left to get to 85. Go Huskies with the praying emoji.
Yes.
Afterwards.
Yeah, I'll be
I think
pulling
there's
for them.
3, right? Isn't it 88 right now?
Well, I'm looking it up. It's 88, but let me pull up the scholarship chart here real quick. It's 88, but I think that there's some expectations of Luke Talich will get a scholarship at some point in time this year.
Okay.
And I think there's expectations they're going to add at least one guy from the portal. So, yeah.
So maybe 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 88 now. Those 2 kids get added. A DB, Luke Talich, you now got to get to, which won't be a problem. I mean, I'm not going to point them out, but there's some easy people on that list that you're like, I'll be surprised if that guy's on the team in the fall. Just some injury history guys, some potential 6th-year guys. Like, I don't take you off the list until you've announced that you're not. Right. Exactly. But there's some guys that we very clearly don't expect to be back next year.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about one of the guys as I was looking at the scholarship chart earlier today. I was like,
you'll have to text it too. Well, again, I don't take anybody off until it's announced that they're not coming back.
And by the way, the speed at which you take these guys off when they announce is pretty impressive.
Sometimes like 2 days later, I'm like, oh, I still have Audric Estime on the roster. It's wishful thinking. Yeah. Whoopsie.
So it's good. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you so much for the super chat. I laugh that I'm labeled Mr. Negative. And I'm like, man, the future is super bright. Great season, in my opinion. Rome wasn't built in a day, but Freeman is building his butt off. Happy New Year's, IB.
Well, Charlie, we appreciate you, man. It's just that sometimes you get in those moods.
He does.
Where just everything sucks.
Yeah.
And I get it. And sometimes it's completely understandable. I mean, like I just said this on the chat not in the chat, but on the message board last night. And I'm like, Notre Dame set an all-time record in scoring, shattered the record. You had a quarterback that had the best single season quarterback rating since Jimmy Clausen in 2009. That was actually, I'm going to look it up here real quick. His passer rating number this year was, I believe, 3rd or 4th best all time at Notre Dame. Let me find it here. It was passer rating. His yards per attempt was 10th, was in the top 10. And the guys that were ahead of him were like 64, 49, 54, 58. You know what I mean? Like, it was a long time ago. And let me go passer rating. Let me go. Okay, his passer rating, Sam Hartman this year had the 3rd best passer rate, single season passer rating in Notre Dame history. Top 10 in yards per attempt. And we're going to look at his season and just be like, it was, Audric Estime does what he does. And then you're going to look at all these things and we're like, how did they lose 3 games? That's the frustration is that it's all these things are true. I mean, Hartman did have a record, a top statistical season. Audric was phenomenal. Joe Alt was phenomenal. The points, the per game, and all this kind of stuff. It's all great. It's all encouraging. But then you look at it and you're like, how the freaking heck did they lose 3 games with this team? That's the frustrating part. So I get it this year because, like you said, the expectations were higher and they should have been better. Part of the reason that that there's such excitement externally for Notre Dame is because outsiders didn't have the same expectations for Notre Dame this year. Sure. So in a lot of people's eyes, outside of Notre Dame fandom, this team overachieved. They were better this year than expected. It just, for a lot of us who thought that, 9-3 was not good enough, it's going to be considered disappointing. Yeah. But to his point, you love the foundation that Marcus Freeman is laying. Now we just got to find out if he can take the next steps. And so far this offseason, to me, it's been great. Overall, on the whole, been great for Marcus Freeman.
I mean, he has a singular focus going into the offseason.
Yeah.
And during the regular season, too, because he made it very clear. It's like, we've scouted these guys. We know who's probably going to be in the port, all of those different things. Like, and so when it happened, when those guys made it official, Notre Dame was like, that's my guy. We're going to go get him. And they did. And I don't know the behind the scenes, but I feel like they're pretty close to batting 1,000 with the guys that they wanted to bring in.
Yeah, close. Yeah, I think there was maybe a couple guys that they would have liked to have looked at that they didn't have much say in, and
Okay.
but not at the positions they've actually hit. Like a receiver, like they passed on Jamal Banks, they passed on Jeremiah Hunter, and so they could have had one of them if they were willing to be patient and wait. They could have had at least one of them.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, they wanted Chris Mitchell, they got him. They wanted Bo Collins, and they got him.
Right.
Riley Leonard was their number one guy. RJ Oben was their top defensive end prospect. They went and got him.
Right.
So in most instances, Vince, you are correct. I think
Right.
there's a couple other guys they would have liked to have maybe had a shot at that just weren't all that interested.
That's fair. And then the coaching hires as well. I feel like
home runs
also went to these are the guys I want. I'm gonna go get them, and I feel like that's how it went down.
Well, and even like the strength coach, I don't know that Lauren Landau was the number one choice. He was more in that top group of guys.
Sure.
Just because I don't think Marcus Freeman really knew a ton about him initially. That's partly why.
Yeah.
Kind of like Matt Bayless wasn't Brian Kelly's number one choice.
Right.
Because when Brian Kelly was originally looking for a strength coach, Matt Bayless had a job and he didn't go after him. It wasn't until Bob Diaco got fired that he then called Brian Kelly and said, hey, you need to look at this Matt Bayless guy. And that's when Brian Kelly was like, I'm going to bring him in along with this guy from USC that I want to bring in. And the guy from USC balked because he didn't want to be – he had already been told he was going to kind of be the strength guy. And Kelly was like, no, I want you guys to kind of do it together. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And it worked great.
Right.
So, and I've said before, Lauren Landau is a mystery to me because I just don't know a lot about him. And I'm not a strength conditioning guy.
Right.
All I can say is the people that I know, professional athletes who have worked with him directly, rave about him, including people like Ryan Harris, who has a vested interest in Notre Dame being successful. It's good for him personally because he's a Notre Dame guy. It's good for him professionally, right? And he swears by Coach Landau. That matters to me. Ryan's opinion of an O-line coach and a strength coach matters to me, especially if it's someone he actually trained with. Like, think about it. For 7 years of his NFL career, him being in the best physical position he could be was the difference in him being employed or unemployed. And the person who he spent his money on to train him to be the best he can be was Lauren Landau. That matters to me. And so that I'm excited about the potential of that hire, even though personally I can't vouch for him because that's just not my world.
Sure.
Like I don't know what
not
makes
many
Matt
of our
Bayless
worlds
so good.
Yeah.
I just know that he is because I see the results and I talk to the people that are part of the program.
Sure.
But I couldn't tell you, well, the proper, reps to weight rest ratios that they're using for their squat program or why they're this, that. And I couldn't tell you that. But I know what the end result needs to be. And the end result under Matt Bayless is excellent. And if Lauren Landau is as good as people tell me he is, that's going to be another great hire that Marcus Freeman made. And I'm knocking on wood that it is because you get that one wrong and it can undercut all the other stuff.
Oh, for sure. Michael S., thanks for the super chat. Watching college football playoff, it seemed to me that all four teams seemed bigger, faster, and more accurate than Notre Dame. How far behind Notre Dame to compete for a title? Happy New Year. I don't
agree with a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's true at all.
More accurate? Yes. That's first of all, Michael Penix is more accurate than any quarterback I've ever seen. The way he threw the deep ball yesterday, I've never seen a quarterback. Maybe Joe Burrow 19. I've never seen a quarterback that accurate. But I mean, look, I do not see teams that are bigger. I mean, at certain spots they're bigger, but Notre Dame's bigger than them at other spots. Faster?
No.
I mean, that was the thing. That was the most eye-opening thing for me in the Bama-Michigan game yesterday is Bama's not that fast of a football team. I mean, they're not the team they used to be speed-wise.
Bama looked
just
mediocre to me.
They're very mediocre.
I'm sorry.
And they just got physically whooped in the trenches by Michigan.
Yeah.
So, no, I just – that's what's part of Michael. That's what's so frustrating for me is that I don't think Notre Dame is behind those teams, that far behind those teams in those areas. They're further behind in coaching in some areas and the talent at certain positions. Like Notre Dame doesn't have Washington's receiving core. They don't have Washington's quarterback. There's no reason Notre Dame can't have their offensive line. There's no reason they can't have their defensive line, and Notre Dame has a better secondary. Like Notre Dame has a better running back room. Notre Dame has a better tight end room, right? So there's a lot of places where Notre Dame is better than teams that were in the playoff. They're just not better at the positions that matter most.
And we talked
And
about
that's
that.
the difference.
Yeah,
Right?
we talked about that.
Right.
Raymond Harton, thanks for the super chat. Laying low in the show today. Still feeling a bit lousy, but hope you guys and the rest of IB Nation had a great New Year's. Go Irish 2020.
Well, I hope you feel better, Raymond. I'm bummed that you're not feeling good, man. I can say, however, I feel your pain, and I hope you hope it doesn't linger very long for you, buddy. Hope you feel better.
Walk on carry off. Thanks for the super chat. You said it, Brian, when they needed the big play or the big playmaker, they were left lacking. Sam wasn't that guy. I think Leonard is Love or Price or a receiver or two. I hope so.
Right. I mean, look, with everything, it's all show me right now. I think Jeremiah Love can be a star. I think Jadarian Price can be a star. I think Jaden Kratos can be a star. I think Cam Williams can be a star. I think Jordan Faison can be a great number 2 in an offense, complementing others. I think the tight end room is loaded with 2 potential big-time All-American caliber tight ends in Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan. So yeah, I think I think Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins could be very impactful for Notre Dame as new guys. I think there's a lot of talent at that position group. But I think Kedron Young can be a star, but they got to show it. I mean, there's not one proven star on the offense right now.
Agreed.
Just like there wasn't a proven star for Washington going into the 2022 season. They had to show it and earn it, and Michael Penix did. Yep. Rome Odunze did. Jalen McMillan did. And then this year, Jalen Polk did.
Yeah.
And, Texas did not have a championship caliber quarterback coming into the season. Quinn Ewers proved himself to be that, but he wasn't coming into the year. He had to earn it.
Right.
Their running back, their leading rusher coming into the season had fewer yards this year than both Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, and was only like 29 yards ahead of Jabron Payne in 2022. And he came out and became a star. Then he got hurt, and other guys stepped in and filled the void, right? It's all got to be earned. The thing that I'm saying is I believe, and I think you are too, Walk On, is the talent is there. That's the difference. And it doesn't require anyone to play out of their minds or be way better than you thought. Just be who I think you are, and this team could be really, really, really good. But at the end of the day, even if all those things are true, it's going to come down to how good is Riley Leonard.
Yeah.
That's the difference between you're a playoff team that maybe wins a game against the 12 seed, or you're a team that can make a run. That's the difference.
Yep.
This is funny.
Joe Poppity,
laugh.
Thanks for the super chat. I blame Parker for everything. No, wait. Hartman. No, wait. Stuckey. No. Freeman. But in reality, I think Hartman was not as good as advertised.
That's fair. He wasn't. Yeah,
right.
I think it's very fair.
Yep.
Very fair. That made me laugh, though. No, it's all Parker. No, wait. Hold on. No, it's all Hartman. Yeah. No, wait. No, it's all Stuckey. Yeah. No. Head coach Freeman's on him. You know what? Screw it. It's Hartman.
Yeah. Like where did the vitriol come from?
I love
today?
it.
That's
I
the
love
question.
it. I love it.
Raymond Harton, thanks for the super chat. Says we still love you, Vince.
Yes, we do.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Raymond. I'll take it. Tyler Evans, thanks for the super chat. Favorite bowl game you watched and one that was a nightmare to watch. Well, the nightmare was easy. That was Florida State. The Florida State one. That was a nightmare to watch. That was hard to watch. Yeah. The best one's a toss-up between the two games yesterday, to be honest with you. Now, I didn't make it through the whole second game. I was exhausted. I went to bed at halftime. But the first game was really, really good. I mean, obviously, I was not rooting for Michigan to win that game, so the outcome was not fantastic. But the game was good. I mean, the closeness of the game was good, and apparently the second game ended up the same way. So
it was interesting. It was 21-21 at half. Like Washington was in control early.
Yes.
Texas battled back. There was a muffed punt that Washington had that helped Texas rally back. It was 21-21. And then Washington, the second half was just better. And then all of a sudden, like, you're just like, they're milking the game, trying to run the clock out. And then Washington, Texas all of a sudden goes out and scores. And you're like, what the heck? And then they get the ball back with like 50 seconds left, and they got to go the length of the field. But then they had a 15-yard penalty on a punt catch interference. They got him 15 extra yards. And then Quinn Ewers made just couple phenomenal throws. And they got all the way down to the 12. with like 20 seconds left.
Oh my gosh.
And they went out, like stopped everyone. And boy, it was a wild finish. Very wild finish. Those games were good. There were some others. I thought that the Western Kentucky Old Dominion game was insane. It was 35-7, I think, at one point in time. It was 28-7 at halftime. Old Dominion was winning, and they lost in overtime. That was a nutty game. The biggest nightmare game for me was Northwestern and Utah. That was probably one of the ugliest games I've ever seen in my life. That was just brutally bad football. I thoroughly enjoy. Oh, the Missouri Ohio State game was pretty awful too. That was ugly football. I didn't watch Georgia Florida State. I just refused. To watch it.
It was so bad.
I knew it was going to be bad. I think it was going to be that bad.
Man, bad.
It was pretty terrible. I mean, look, take away the outcome for a second. The Wisconsin LSU game yesterday was very entertaining. It was back and forth game. It was a very entertaining game. Luke Fickell showed he is not a big time coach.
Yes,
I'm sorry. There are multiple times where he's just like, you're coaching like a guy that's not trying to win the game. And they made some bad defensive calls in that game as well. But it was a very entertaining game to watch. I mean, it's kind of what you want bowl games to be.
Honestly, yesterday was a great day of watching football.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty great.
But my favorite bowl game of all of them was the 40-8 victory by Notre Dame over Oregon State.
John A1, thanks for the super chat. Can you rank the G's guards, I'm assuming, returning in 2024 based on your opinion of project to be the best next year?
Project to be the best next year. So he's not asking us to say who has the best pimp walk on the who's the G's, who's the real G's.
I want to know who the G's are.
The guards. Well, I mean, I'd have to put Billy Schrouth at the top.
Agreed.
I'll tell you what, I would have liked to have seen Rocco Spindler with a full off season, because Rocco had some rough moments this year, but Rocco also had some really good moments this year, Vince. And I would have liked to have seen him with a full off season, but I can't put him in there now. 320-pound guy coming off a late season knee injury. It's just not a good recipe for being ready to be the starter day one of the season.
Sure.
I mean, look, I still got to put Pat Coogan number 2 because the experience, but look, the guy that I really think could have the best chance to push for a job next year. I don't know if you're going to agree with this, Vince. The guy's playing guard right now. It's Sam Pendleton. Like, that kid really impresses me, dude. Like, he is, and like you see him, and he's just kind of got that country boy kind of body to him. You know what I mean? Like, just he's really reshaped his body well, but he's still just kind of that just big country boy type of body type he just wants to fight right way, football wise.
Right.
He wants to hit, he wants to strike, he wants to blow you off the ball, he wants to kind of embarrass you a little bit, and then he's a yes sir, no sir kid off the field. It's like he's kind of what you expect a Notre Dame offensive lineman to be: big, physical, punishing, polite, friendly. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Great student. And then another kid that I'm keeping my eye on too, it may be a situation where it's like this kid's too good to leave at tackle, could be Sullivan Absher. That'd be another one that I would look at and say, okay, those are kids that are on my radar to maybe have a chance to compete next year for a starting job. But I mean, you're gonna have to beat Pat Coogan out, right? Like, this isn't a deal where I'm advocating for just play the more talented player now and then roll with it. They're gonna have to give them a reason to not play Pat Coogan next year, in my opinion. Same with Billy Schrouth. I mean, look, I think Billy's a starter, but Billy's going to have to play better too. I mean, than he did. I expect him to, because again, he only had 3 starts under his belt, but he's going to have to play better too. I just think he's going to take a bigger jump next year. But yeah, Sam Pendleton and Sullivan Absher are 2 guys who you're just like, could you imagine Sullivan Absher and Charles Jagasaw playing side by side, or even Charles Jagasaw or Sam Pendleton? Like, hey, it's 3rd and 1. Where are you running? Everyone in the stadium knows where we're running. We're running to the left, and it doesn't matter. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. You know what I mean? Because we're going to put Eli Raridan or Cooper Flanagan on the outside of Charles Jagasaw, and then you have Jagasaw and Pendleton, or Jagasaw and Absher, and I'll put Keidron Young in the game, and just be like, good luck. You know what I mean? And then I'm running read zone off of it with Riley Leonard. Good luck stopping us on 3rd and 1 is the way I'd look at it if I'm an OC. But, yeah, that gets me a little fired up.
Yeah, for good reason.
Gets me real fired up. Yeah, no doubt. Good question, John. Very good question. Let's get back to the top.
All right, Quinn, would Michigan have matched up more favorably against Texas than they do to Washington?
It's similar to me. I mean,
Right.
there's areas where I think Texas matches up better against Michigan, and there's areas where I think Washington matches up better against Michigan. Like I have a buddy of mine calls me. He's just some people are just so paranoid. Love the it's just like Michigan winning it all would just be horror to him. And it is to me too. I still don't fathom how there's some Notre Dame fans that were rooting for Michigan yesterday. I was like,
seriously?
Nuts. Oh yeah. On our board. It's nuts to me. And
okay.
But it's just he's like, oh, there's some matchups, man. I'm like, dude, you and I have been having this argument for 2 months. Every week, literally, Vince, every week for the last 2 months, this guy's been telling me this is the weekend Washington gets beat. Like, at what point in time do you just admit you were wrong about Washington? But there's some matchups that really favor Michigan. Yeah, and there's some matchups that favor – like, there was a guy on the message board that said he didn't think Washington was going to be able to throw at all on Michigan. Like, what are you watching? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't see that.
Like, how do you – it is what it is. But there's some areas where Michigan has a matchup advantage and areas where Washington does. I think overall, Washington matches up better because if it came down to it, and I liked what I saw from Quinn Ewers this year, but when it comes down to it, I trust Michael Penix more than I trust him. And here's the other thing. Michael Penix has played in the Big Ten. He knows the Big Ten. He knows
true. That's a good point.
He's that league. And so did Kalen DeBoer. He was at Indiana not that long ago. So I'm excited about what they can be. Nice. My dad just texted me. He's at the store finally buying his first pistol. I'm very excited. I've been trying to get him to do it for over a month now. So he just texted me while I'm doing the show. But yeah, I think Washington. I think Texas. Now, to the question of would Texas have matched up better against Michigan than Washington? Yes, because the one weakness Washington's had all year, or Texas had all year, Vince, pass defense, and I don't know that Michigan could have hurt them the way that Washington did. Right? I mean, and Texas is really good up the middle on off defensive line, and I think they could have played with Michigan up front, but I think Washington matches up better against Michigan than Texas does. Overall, thoughts?
I don't know Texas and Washington that well, so I don't want to jump in and really give a solid opinion on this. You watch way more college football than I do, so
all good. I don't have 5 kids.
I just love watching Michael Penix play the game,
and it's my job. So,
well, there's that.
Not yours.
Tommy says, "How would you rate and rank the quarterback play in the Year 6 playoff? Where would Angeli's game fit into that ranking?"
It doesn't. Because it's a completely different game than those others. I mean, Steve did some really nice things in the bowl game. There's no doubt about it. But with all due respect, there wasn't the pressure on him that there was on Jalen Milroe or Quinn Ewers or the other quarterbacks that were out there. Now, I'll tell you this. If Florida State's coach has half a brain, I would much rather have Steve Angeli than Brock Glenn. Like, no doubt about that one. I would rather have Steve Angeli than Tate Rodemaker, to be honest with you. Steve Angeli is a good quarterback. He's just not a championship quarterback, but neither of those guys either. The other New Year's 6 games, Vince, I mean, Bo Nix was phenomenal. I mean, like, really good. Notre Dame fans are losing their minds and coming at us because we didn't think a guy that threw for 236 yards against the number 84 pass defense and a team that was missing half their starting defense, and, we're haters. Did you watch Bo Nix against Liberty? Did you watch him go 28 of 35 for 363 yards and 5 touchdowns in the Fiesta Bowl?
And didn't play the 3/4 of the fourth quarter.
Exactly. No. Like, that was electric. That was really, really good. The Peach Bowl, that was actually a really entertaining game, and it ended the way that I'd hoped I'd ended it. But Jackson Dart was phenomenal. 379 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for another touchdown against a much better defense than Notre Dame played in a bigger game than what Notre Dame played. So, I mean, there was some great quarterback play in this bowl season. Miller Moss for USC was freaking amazing.
He actually played really well.
He was amazing in that game.
He played well.
I mean, like the last touchdown pass that he threw when Louisville was trying to come back, where they blitzed him, and he throws just a seam ball off his back foot, and I'm like, holy crap! I didn't know that kid had it in him. He threw for 372 yards and 6 touchdowns. I'm like, I didn't think that dude had it in him. And of course, the whole game, I'm still telling myself, how the heck did we freaking lose to Jack Plummer? How the heck did they lose to that freaking guy?
Seriously.
Then you watch and you're like, okay, but he didn't have Jamari Thrash. They didn't have the Jordan kid at running
Didn't
back.
matter.
Was short-handed
Still
too.
Jack Plummer.
But still, I come back to how the freaking heck did you lose to Jack Plummer?
When we were going into that game, we as an IB staff, and we were talking about the game and we're doing our predictions. If you would have told me what is one absolute you have going into the Louisville Notre Dame game, it was that there's no chance that Jack Plummer could beat Notre Dame. Yeah. Like that was my absolute. No. It was like it's not going to happen.
I'm with you. There was some great quarterback play in this. I mean, Jason Bean against UNLV. I mean, kid threw for 449 yards and 6 touchdowns, threw 3 picks. There's some really great quarterback play, and Steve Angeli played really well in that game. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Steve, but I mean, Michael Penix went out and threw for 430 yards in a playoff game. Like, come on, man. That's just
right.
That's just a different level of stuff right there. You know who else played really well in his bowl game? It was the night we did the IB get together. Avery Johnson played really well for Kansas State.
Kansas State, yeah.
Yeah, he played really well. Passed for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ran for 71 yards and a touchdown. He's a true freshman. He's going to be a good player.
I mean, there's 12 quarterbacks, right, in the year 6?
Yeah.
So
I'm sitting there and rank them all.
No, I mean, just like ballpark. He's in the bottom third.
Who?
Steve Angeli.
I mean, it's unfair to say that because he didn't play in the New Year 6.
That's also true.
You know, I mean, and it's like we don't know how he would have handled a bigger moment. For all we know, if the moment was bigger, Steve might have played even better.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's unfair to even have that conversation because the moment was different.
Yeah.
I mean, I could sit there and say, like, look, I mean, he didn't play as well as Jackson Dart. He didn't play as well as Michael Penix. He didn't play well, you know, as you know, I'm trying to think through some other I'll say this, he definitely played better than anybody in the Cotton Bowl. That's for darn sure. I mean, so you can at least put him there.
Yeah.
You know, he played way better than the kids in the Cotton Bowl. That's not even close. That was the first New Year's 6 game. That was terrible football, and he definitely played better than Brock Glenn. You know, his numbers were better than Carson Beck, but Carson Beck didn't need to do anything in that game. You know, I mean, you know, he played half the game. It was 42-3 at halftime. So it's just unfair to compare it. And look, Steve played really well. And let's just leave it at that and stop trying to compare him to what Michael Penix did and all that. And again, he didn't have the pressure on him that Quinn Ewers had last season. So he had better numbers of Quinn Ewers. He was playing on a much bigger stage against a much better team.
Yeah, you can't even.
It's not even comparable.
No.
You know, and so it's hard to say, but there's really good quarterback play in the bowl season. There's no doubt. Really good quarterback play. Oh, God, no. Go ahead and read the question, but my answer is going to be no.
Can you expand? This is Tommy again. Can you expand on the offensive performance by Ohio State and Missouri? Was that worse than the $2 taco and sushi?
No, that was worse.
Oh, that was worse. Okay.
Then a $2 taco and sushi bar at a truck stop. You are not wrong, buddy. Can I expand on it? Yes. Do I want to? No, and I'm not gonna, because that was embarrassing. Vince, you texted me the perfect response, and we'll leave it at that. This set offensive football back a decade. That's what Vince texted me during the game, and he was spot on. That was terrible, and I don't want to talk about it any further.
So hard.
I really don't.
That one was bad.
That one was awful.
That one was
and I don't want to hear about who wasn't in the game and all
Doesn't matter.
Crap.
Doesn't matter.
You know,
the game plan for those guys was terrible.
Yeah. Would I trade Steve Angeli for Devin Brown as a 5-star recruit? Heck no. Heck no.
Yeah, no.
Same class. Heck no.
Nothing I saw from either quarterback for Ohio State would I take him over Steve Angeli. No chance.
No. Well, so one's a sophomore, one's a freshman. I'll put it like this. I would not take Devin Brown over Steve Angeli. I would not take the kid from Idaho over Kenny Minchie.
Okay, there you go.
I think that's more fair.
That's okay. Yep,
me.
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Iden says, what did we think about Hartman's comments about letting us down this year? He might have, but man, he is classy. I think all he said was that he let them down by not playing in the bowl game.
Correct. Yeah, he was talking about the bowl game.
Season.
Yeah. I mean,
it's okay.
He's a smart kid. He's a nice kid. I have no issue with Sam. I think Sam's a good kid. Sam was completely bought into Notre Dame this year. I got no beef with him. He just didn't play well.
Right.
As simple as that. And
at times.
And yeah, it'd have been nice to see him in a bowl. I would have much rather had. I mean, I didn't like that he chose not to play. I didn't like the circumstances in which I was told he chose not to play. I don't like the fact he originally told him he was going to play and then decided not to. But at the end of the day, it worked out well because you got a chance to see Steve Angeli.
Yeah.
And Steve got that. I mean, because here's the thing. What if Riley Leonard gets hurt in the first game next year? It's going to be good that Steve got this kind of, because it's not just about the game. It's the month of preparation where he's the guy.
Sure.
He has to live in that spotlight for, several weeks. And that's good experience for him.
Right.
In that situation. So to me,
Agreed.
It's good that he didn't play. So the end result I'm good with. I just didn't like the manner in which we got there. That was more of my issue with because if Sam would have just said from day one, hey, I'm not playing in the bowl game, I'd have been like, hey man, appreciate you.
Yeah.
I think you tried your hardest. It just didn't work out.
Right.
And that's how I'll still feel that way about Sam. I was so impressed with how much he did buy in. I mean, he came to the bowl game and you could see the way the players reacted to him, that there's a lot of respect there. Both ways, mutual respect there, going both ways. And I'll always respect that. It just wasn't good enough from a production standpoint.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that, you tear the kid down, which I'm seeing some people do, and he's not a Notre Dame guy. That's nonsense.
That's nonsense. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nothing about what he did.
He didn't play well enough.
Notre Dame guy.
Exactly. He's just as simple as that. Now, most Notre Dame fans would disagree with that sentiment because I think most Notre Dame fans really appreciated the buy-in that Sam had this year. Right? He wasn't good enough. Simple as that.
Right.
He wasn't good enough.
USMA 87, did you happen to notice the OSU DB catch phase on a 55-yard play? That DB can motor.
Well, he can.
A good angle.
He can. Two things. Number one is from the minute the ball left Steve's hand, he was on a dead sprint.
Correct.
Jordan had to slow down and then accelerate back up. That factored into it. And the other thing is Jordan's not a burner either. But yeah, that kid covered a lot of ground.
He covered about 2/3 of the field.
Well, they did the same thing on the Jadarian Price one. I thought he was gone at first. And that safety had a good angle and he ended up getting to him because we know Jadarian can run. But yeah, those safeties covered a lot of ground on those. They did. Because I think it was different kids. I think Cooper was the second one, and then the Ola DePato kid was the one that caught Jordan on the first one. But yeah, he had to slow as he's slowing down to catch that ball. That kid's on a dead sprint to get over top. So, but yeah, it was a great hustle play by that kid.
Tom Flavin. Have followed college football since 1953 and trying to remember when I've seen a better college passer than Penix. Any suggestions?
Joe Burrow, easily. I love what Michael Penix did this year. He had a great year. He did. It doesn't even sniff what Joe Burrow did in 2019. Doesn't even sniff. I mean, Joe Burrow completed 76.3% of his passes. Michael Penix completed 66.7%. Michael Penix threw for this season has thrown for 4,900 yards. Let me pull up Michael's numbers. The team, he threw for 4,648 yards and 35 touchdowns, 9.2 per attempt. Joe Burrow passed for 5,671 yards, 10.8 yards per attempt. Michael Penix had 35 touchdowns this year, 9 interceptions. Joe Burrow had 60 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. Like and I love Michael Penix. It's not even close. I mean, somebody made a point like he threw for 430 yards yesterday. Michael Penix in 4 quarters. Joe Burrow threw for over 490 and didn't even play but a series in the second half, like against Oklahoma in the playoff game. And then he was also pretty freaking good against Clemson in the championship game. He threw for 463 yards and 5 touchdowns, 9.4 yards per attempt against Clemson in the title game. That he went 28 of 38 for 349 yards and 4 touchdowns, 9.2 attempt against Georgia in the SEC title game. Like, that guy was insanely good that year. Against Bama that year, he went 31 of 39 for 393 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, he was insane. I've never seen anything like what he did that year. And it just puts into context how good he's been. Because if Michael Penix throws for 500 yards in the championship game, he'll get to 5,200 yards, which means he's still 400 yards short of what Joe Burrow did. In order to tie him he'd have to throw 25 touchdowns in the championship game to tie Joe Burrow. 25.
Yeah, that's
not happening. You know what I mean? Like, it was insane. It was insane. Somebody asked how he compares to Jimmy Clausen, pure mechanics. He's better off platform than Jimmy was. Little quicker release than Jimmy, but not by a ton. But he has a much stronger arm than Jimmy had. And he's a better athlete in the pocket. I mean, like, he doesn't get enough credit for his pocket mobility. There was that one throw, Vince, yesterday. He kind of like sidesteps a pass rusher real quick and snaps it off over the middle. He does that stuff real calmly that people don't notice how good he is in the pocket. Yeah. Yeah. He just as a passer, he's exceptional. Right. I mean, he was the best passing quarterback in college football this year, with all due respect to Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback when you take the entirety of the whole game, because Jaden was also a 1,000-yard rusher.
Right.
Right. But as far as just a passer, he was clearly the best. But it wasn't even close to how good Joe Burrow was 2 years ago, in my opinion. Vince, thoughts? Agree?
I agree.
Disagree?
Nope, I'm with you. The Joe Burrow. The thing is, we're going to be comparing guys to Joe Burrow for a long, long time, because there's not going to be.
It's just not even fair.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
exactly it almost right. Like kind of takes away from how great a guy has been. Like, Michael Penix has been great this year, but it's like, let's just enjoy his greatness and not compare it to what was the most absurd season I've ever seen in my life from Joe Burrow. Just absolutely absurd.
Levi Perez, thoughts on both semifinal college CFP games?
I mean, I think Michigan was clearly the better team in that game. I mean,
I tweeted about it.
The only reason it was even close is because Michigan made some really dumb special teams mistakes.
Yep.
If it wasn't for that, that game's probably not all that close, Vince.
Yep, I agree.
You know, and I know everybody's banging on Tommy Rees for that terrible play call at the end of the game, which I agree was a bad play call. But it's kind of like, game never should have got there. I mean, they just got outplayed the whole game. I mean, they really did. And I thought it was going to be a blowout the other way, because first play of the game, it's like he gets picked off.
I was like, oh,
you know,
here we go.
Yep, roll, blowout.
Yeah.
Oh, and absolutely. It was the right call. I mean, he stepped out.
It was.
It was the right call.
Totally. Yeah.
Because like the first replay, I'm like, oh, he's in bounds. He's definitely in bounds for the pick. Like, it should be a pick. And then they showed another replay, and you're like, oh, he stepped jumped out. And then they showed the referee throwing the hat. You're like, yeah,
which was
he
the right call.
It was the right call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a hard fought game. I thought Michigan's early game plan with how they used their backs out of the backfield in the pass game was really good.
Yeah.
And they were always just kind of one step ahead of Bama. And if they didn't shoot themselves in the foot, I'm telling you, that game is not, I mean, it's probably, it might have still ended 27-20, but it would have been like 27-20 where Bama scores at the end to make it 27-20, kind of like the Washington-Texas game. Like, Texas scored and they made it closer, but it was very clear for most of the game that Washington was a better team. But, they made their own mistakes to let Texas stay in. They had the muffed punt that allowed Texas to get a score and all that. But, yeah, he was so I just don't understand. Like, some people just love to argue for some reason. With all due respect, never. I'm not even gonna get into it. I'm not even gonna get into it. Just whatever. If you think Jaden Daniels is a better passer than Michael Penix, then good for you. We'll just agree to disagree and leave it at that.
I'm glad I got the comments turned off. All right,
Yeah.
John A1 says, after watching Blake Fisher the last 7 games in 22, why was he worse in 23? Why did Zeke Correll revert from time to time to what we saw under Quinn? They got worse this year.
Well, there was a constant. There were constant issues with footwork this season. That's my biggest issue with Coach Rudolph. Even in the last 3 games, that's still my one beef. They stop their feet on contact way too much. They'll come off hard and then hit, Vince, and then stop and not drive through contact. Ashton Craig can get away with that because he's longer and a little bit more athletic. Zeke can't. Zeke can't get away with that. He's got to drive his feet through contact. He's got to play with better pad level. I think with Blake Fisher, just as a focus problem. Blake doesn't focus. Yeah. And hey, 99 Problems, I'm not bringing up your mailbag question. You're going to have to rewrite that one. I'll just leave it at this, Vince. He spelled Penix wrong, and in a way that I'm not pulling it up on the screen. So if you want me to pull it up, then yes.
I was going to say, I've been misspelling his name all season, but not that way.
Yeah. Yes, you have.
Because you gave me a hard time for that, my pick.
Yeah. Yes, you have.
So yes,
anyway,
I understand what you're saying. All right.
Here we go.
Broke neck boy. Championship predictions, reaction to the 2 bowl games, and were they top 5 college football playoff games? Jim saying JJ is the best quarterback in Michigan in college football. Of course he says that. He's his head coach.
Charlie Weiss also said that Brady Quinn was better than Tom Brady. So, I mean, what's he supposed to say?
Right.
I mean, I just would rather him not say anything about it,
right.
To be honest with you. But whatever. I don't care. I mean, they were 2 of the best semifinal games we've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought the Michigan game was even with the sloppiness, it was still, it was a very sloppy game. Bad snaps, missed PATs, muffed punts, turnovers. It was a sloppy game, but it was also a good game. There was the guys were being physical. Guys were stepping up and making plays. I mean, there's a lot to like about that game. The Washington, Texas game was a way better game. Way better coach teams, like not as many self-inflicted wounds. But there were some. Like I said, Washington had their own muffed punt that allowed Texas to get a score and tie the ball game up. But they were 2 good games. Were they 2 of the best ever? I mean, most semifinal games have been pretty crappy. Neither was as good as the Ohio State-Georgia game from last year. Like, that was a better game. And honestly, I'll say, I think last year's semifinal games were even better. I mean, they were great games. Just phenomenal games, Vince.
Yeah.
These were also very good, though. But, I mean, you had what was a 5-point game and a 1-point game last year. Both teams had the ball with a chance to win at the end. Also true this year.
Yeah.
It just last year's 2 games were better than this year's because the Michigan-Alabama game was just really sloppy. Still a very good game, very entertaining game, but just a very sloppy game. I mean, 2021 or 2021, the playoff games were kind of I mean, I'm trying to I've kind of blocked 2021 out of my mind a little bit. Yeah, Georgia-Bama game and the title game was kind of Yeah, Georgia-Michigan was a boring game. Alabama-Cincinnati was a boring game. 2020 semifinal games were both blowouts. 2019 Ohio State-Clemson game is in my top 5 for playoff games. So that was better than both of the games last night, in my opinion. So they're in the top 5 right now. The other playoff game that year was a god-awful blowout. It was LSU and Oklahoma. 2018, both playoff games, both semifinal games were kind of anticlimactic. The Oklahoma game was an okay game, but you never thought they were going to lose. Bama was going to lose. 17, the semifinal game sucked. Clemson had no chance against Bama. Georgia, who did Georgia beat? Oh, you know what? That's the greatest semifinal game ever right there. 2017 Oklahoma, Georgia. The one with the overtime that Oklahoma won 54, that was a 54-48. To me, that was the best semifinal game ever. 16, the semifinal games were terrible. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the Michigan game is not top 5. The Washington, Texas game was. I'd go Bama, Georgia, Bama, Oklahoma 2015 or 2017. I'd go Ohio State, Michigan, or Ohio State, Georgia last year. number 2. Ohio State, Clemson, 2019, number 3. I'd go TCU, Michigan last year, number 4, and then Texas, Washington last night, number 5. That'd be my 5.
Okay. All right, 99 problems. If Mike Denbrock is 80% of what we all think, then that will be worth 7 to 10 points in the big games easily. I also suspect it's worth a few points off the scoreboard for the opposing team too.
Actually, I'll disagree with the last part because I think what's going to happen is if Notre Dame is just blowing people out as much as you can, then you're going to get some late touchdowns. They're going to add points, just like we kind of saw this year.
And you're going to get quick scores, which is going to allow more possessions for the other teams.
Exactly. I could see the defense kind of being about the same next year. Maybe give up slightly more points by a point, or 2, because it's 38-0 when you pull your starters and they put 2 touchdowns on at the end of the game. Oregon State game's a perfect example. Man, they couldn't even cross midfield.
Oh my gosh, they couldn't
sniff it
out. Yeah,
right.
And then it took a pretty amazing catch, also by the way, on pretty good coverage by Chance Tucker to score that touchdown. But either way,
so yeah, I mean, I think if anything, if he's as good as we think, it's actually you're going to see Notre Dame blowing teams out even more, and you're going to give up more second half points because of it.
Right.
So
the ones that won't matter, but
it would be interesting to see. Yeah. I mean, and look, it's going to be kind of hard to take that many points off of what Notre Dame did this year. I mean, they had the 7th best scoring defense in college football this year, as I think is where they were. Let me just look that up real quick. Notre Dame's scoring defense this year. Yeah, they were 7th in college football this year, 6th amongst Power 5 teams in scoring. You take a touchdown off of that, you're talking about giving up 8 points a game. Nobody, like less than 10 points a game. No. We haven't seen a team give up less than 10 points a game since I think Bama did that early in this decade. No, even that, 2011, Bama's the last time we saw a team give up single-digit points. To take a touchdown off of Notre Dame's total, even if you just do 6 points, not even the extra point, they're going to do something I've seen. I don't expect them to be that good. I don't expect them to be that good. Very good. But it may not show up as statistically as well as it did this year because, kind of what we had said before. Good thoughts, though. I do agree. I do agree with the first part. 10 points is not going to happen. Again, we need to set expectations a little bit more realistically. They're not going to score 49 points a game next year.
No, he's saying in the big games.
The big game. Okay, big games.
So the three losses this year, they average 20 points a game.
Yeah.
So he's saying they could average
big games,
27, 30.
And that's the other thing too. Is now I didn't read that part. So the taking a touchdown off defensively could definitely happen in the big games, like not giving up 31 like they did at Clemson. Fair. Not giving up 30. That is very true.
Because you're going to possess the ball longer.
I didn't see the big games part. When you look at just the big games, easily touchdown off a team's board, if not 10 points. So yes, I will say yes to that. Sorry I missed that. I totally missed that. But yes, I could definitely see that, Vince. Like in the big games, 7 to 10 in the big games plus 7 to 10 off, 100%. So all the other crap I just talked about, ignore all of it. The answer to this question is yes. If Mike Denbrock is as good as we think, then yes.
That's funny.
All the things you said are true. Absolutely. My bad.
Blue Gold Matter. How defeating it feels for us Notre Dame fans to have someone like Washington have this super team out of nowhere. Like, how the hell does that happen? It's not out of nowhere. They were pretty darn good last year.
Yeah. First of all, they've been in the playoff before.
Correct.
And this is their second playoff berth.
Right.
They also made it 2 years before Notre Dame made it, number one. This is a team that's won a national championship since the last time Notre Dame won a national. Like, guys, this isn't some nobody program like Oregon State came out of nowhere and won a title, playing for a title.
Right.
Or TCU last year, right? Like, this is a big-time program and has been for a while that went 11-2 last year, Vince, and their 2 losses, and we've talked about this before. Their 2 losses last year were by 8 points and 7 points to UCLA and Arizona State. I mean, they've beaten Oregon 3 times in the last 2 years. This shouldn't be a they've beat Texas twice in the last 2 years because they beat Texas in the postseason last year. So
Right.
I picked them to be in the playoff this year.
Right. It's not out of nowhere.
Be a surprise to anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is Kalen DeBoer is now 25-2 since taking over at Washington. This isn't out of nowhere. And it shouldn't be defeating at all, Vince.
Right.
It should be encouraging. You
absolutely
make the right coaching decisions and get the right portal quarterback, and you can go from 4-8 to playing for the national championship in 2 years. That shouldn't be defeating at all. That should be encouraging, in my opinion. Absolutely encouraging.
Agreed. Completely. 99 problems. If you go position by position, group, QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, how would you rank them in all of college football heading into next season? That's a tough question.
I'm just going to go real and then who would you trade with? Alabama, I asked because I wouldn't trade. I'm not going to do the trading thing just yet because I need to study more who everyone else has coming back. And so, and that also is going to be the position ranking is very loose ranking because it's loose based on a typical season. This is what a top 10, it's kind of like somebody asked a really good question a couple weeks ago about how can you say a guy's a top 100 caliber player if you haven't watched the rest of the players? And it's like, it's a very fair question. It's more of this is what a top 100 player tends to look like.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's same thing here. So we'll go, hold on a second. But so I'll just kind of generally what a top 10 unit looks like. Quarterback, how would you rank them right now? Top 10 with the potential to be even better if Riley Leonard gets back to being healthy and is the guy I think he can be. Running back room, top 5. Receiver room right now, top 15 with a chance to be top 10. Tight end room, top 5 once Mitchell Evans gets back to being healthy.
Yep.
O-line, top 10 with a chance to be top 5. That's how I would rank them. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
So running back, tight end, top 5.
And that goes along with what we said in the earlier parts of the show today. I mean, I think that all is in line. Yeah, for sure.
And we'll actually do some stuff like this 99 as we get closer to the season.
Right.
We're gonna do a little bit more in-depth comparing Notre Dame to the rest of college football in this year's lead up. That's going to be one of the changes that I'm making.
Matthew wants to know how many more moves need to be made to meet the scholarship numbers. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but 5-ish, depending on how things go. As we stand today, it's 3. But as you said earlier, there's a chance they get one more out of the portal, and then possibly putting a walk-on on scholarships. That brings it up to 5. So they would have to lose 5 guys.
Gotcha. Yep.
Right?
Yep. That's right.
Just wanted to recap that. Army 72, looking at Michigan's success, in part a powerful offensive line. Should we place more emphasis on power than versatility? Nothing. We passed on recruiting Zinter, but UM grabbed him.
No, I mean, I don't think Notre Dame is sacrificing power for versatility at all. I mean, look, you don't recruit Charles Jagasaw and Gerby Lambert and Sam Pendleton and Sullivan Absher and Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth if you're sacrificing power for anything.
Right.
I mean, I think the issue is more development and the way that they build their team, just a mindset standpoint that Notre Dame is lacking. But no, I don't think that they've sacrificed power at all. Now, I believe that's something Jeff Quinn was doing. And that's why we saw a lot of guys that were more athletes, Caleb Johnsons, Tosh Bakers, guys like that, Michael Carmody's that were more athletic than they were powerful. Harry Easton certainly is not doing that, and Joe Rudolph hasn't done that, in my opinion. So it's about a coaching development thing more than it is anything else, in my opinion.
Matt Norton, I know this show is about the offense, but I'm so hyped that Watts is coming back. Notre Dame may very well have the best secondary in the nation next season.
Well, they were in the conversation for this year too. Obviously, the second safety position is going to be the big question mark right now. But if we're doing D-line rankings, the secondary is certainly, to me, a top 5 secondary going into next season. I don't know that they'll get the national love for that.
Sure,
but they will be,
because they're just not known for that, and it's tough to bust that preconceived notion, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Big Jim with a comment that I love, Vince. This is
I swear on all that is holy, I will never understand a Notre Dame fan not despising Michigan. I had that conversation with somebody yesterday during the game as they're clearly rooting for Michigan.
Yeah.
And this particular person graduated from Michigan State.
Yeah.
Worked at Notre Dame and is a Notre Dame fan. What are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing?
Now, like, I get that there's, I hate the SEC and I understand that, but I don't want Michigan to be the team that, brings down the SEC dominance, right? I mean, that's just not what you want to see.
100%. Now, the person that I was talking to said that his hatred was more towards, he had more of a hatred for Nick Saban for leaving Michigan State. He said he was deserted. That was his thing. I was like, come on, man.
Get over yourself.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Get over yourself.
Michael S. with a super chat. Aside, almost all of Alabama's players have huge trunks. Is that a result of their weight room preference, or do they recruit to that look?
Well, it's both. I mean, you're recruiting big body types.
Sure.
And then the weight program adds to those body types, maximizes those body types. But yeah, you're recruiting bigger players. Like Harry Heastan started to do last year with Charles Jagasaw, Simon Absher. I mean, look, 4 of your 5 biggest offensive linemen this year, or 3 of your 4 biggest offensive linemen this year on your roster were true freshmen.
Right.
That's you're recruiting a different body type. And yeah.
Right.
Peter Jones and Gerby Lambert and those guys, you're adding to that. You're adding to that, absolutely.
Thanks for the super chat, though, Michael.
Yes, absolutely, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you very much. Tommy Guns, just yes or no, from a player standpoint, has there been any addition by subtraction so far from this portal opt-out season?
Yes, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to disparage certain players, but yes, there are some attitudes that are gone.
Yep.
From the transfer portal that you're going to be better off not having those attitudes, and I'll just leave it at that.
It's fair. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
We'll
just leave it at that. Yep.
And that's all he wanted. He only wanted was a yes or no, and that's all you're going to get.
You're correct.
T. Smith, what went wrong with OSC O-line in their game? I felt like OSU fans need to apologize to McCord. Oh,
yes, they do.
This is Ohio State. There's so many OSUs that we've had to deal with lately, so I wasn't sure if we were talking Oregon State or whatever until you got to the McCord part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Well, actually, they don't, because this whole you need to apologize. I'm so over that. Like you don't have to apologize for having an opinion about sports. Guys, let's come on. If you talk about someone, disparage their character, and you're wrong, you apologize for that. Not thinking Kyle McCord's not a very good quarterback, it's not something you have to apologize for, even if you get to prove to be wrong. It's a freaking sports opinion. We don't need to apologize for sports opinions. But I understand where you're coming from. I think he's being a little sarcastic. It's just that's the thing that kind of triggers me a little bit. But yes, Vince, I don't know if Vince is paying attention anymore. You locked in? Okay.
I'm actually texting Sean about the show tonight.
Gotcha. Tell Sean he can hold on until we're done with this show, and then you guys can deal with the next show. It doesn't start for almost 2 hours, so you'll have time. But the O-line, Vince, that it just is kind of thing that happened to them all year. They kind of got their butts kicked. They're just not very talented, and they're not coached very well. And Archer in the chat was kind of talking about Justin Fry, and it's like they're not big fans. But I mean, you can only do so much when you don't have talent, and they don't have a lot of talent. They have some. Donovan Jackson's very talented. I think Carson Hinsman's going to be a really good player someday. But their left tackle, you and I talked about this over the summer, dude. Josh Simmons from San Diego State, he ain't it.
Right.
Like y'all are throwing stuff up against the wall and hoping it sticks. That's the difference.
Right.
So, and also I think the other thing too is this is a Ryan Day problem, that he just does not create a culture of toughness. And when you play teams like that are motivated or physical or whatever, you can't just turn that switch on. So Ryan Day can blame whoever he wants for all these issues. Ryan Day needs to look in the mirror and blame himself. And if I'd get as pissed at myself as I did at Lou Holtz, maybe I might actually not keep getting my brains bit in by Michigan. Maybe. Just a thought.
Doubtful, but yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I think you're right. I don't think I don't. He doesn't strike me as someone who has that kind of reflection. Enough
It's going to be a
self-reflection.
rough year next year for Ohio State. I'll just
I
say
have a
that.
feeling. I have a feeling.
All right.
And they could not beg a portal quarterback to come there.
I
And that's the
know.
craziest thing.
Man.
Nobody gave them a sniff. Like, they might end up with Will Howard, who just got benched for Avery Johnson, a true
Man.
freshman.
Good luck, Ohio State. I would love to play Ohio State next year, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yep.
We've had this one.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's all good. Nathan, Brian, and Vince, thoughts on the Northwestern nickel / safety target, Ron Hurd?
Rod is actually, I believe it's Rod,
right.
Hurd, isn't it? No, you said what he said, but let me just check here real quick to make sure that that's correct, because I could be wrong, but I believe it's Rod. Yeah, it's Rod Hurd. Well, he's a safety target, not a nickel target, from what I'm told. And so I've got to watch more film on him. I don't love him as a nickel. He gets beat a lot. He's not a great cover guy, but he's a smart kid, decent quality athlete, good size, 5'11", 185, 190. As a safety, there's value there. As a nickel, there's not. And so that's more of a statement of that's not a good sign that that's the best safety target on the board for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But, look, he played in the Big Ten this year, Vince. He had 85 tackles on a pretty quality defensive football team. And so that's why, as a safety, I think there's some value there.
Sure.
As a safety, 4 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles. There's some value there to that. So I feel better about him being a safety target than I do a nickel target. That was kind of my concern. Is if you're bringing him in as a nickel and you look at his numbers according to Pro Football Focus, it's really bad, like really bad. But as a safety, I like it better, and at least gives you some assurances in case your young guys aren't ready.
Sure.
You can slide him in there, and I mean he could be DJ Brown, right? I mean, he could be DJ Brown, but you hope that he becomes what DJ Brown should have been, which is your number 3 safety, not your number 2.
Right.
But that's going to be determined by how well Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick handle this offseason. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for that one. But it'd be a solid pickup if they get him. It's not guaranteed that they're going to get him, but I think they're in a pretty good place there. But it's not a needle mover. It's more of a protect yourself kind of move.
Sure.
Because you're relying on so many young guys, in my opinion. But you'd hope that maybe those younger guys step up and play well enough.
I'm hoping one of the younger guys steps up and plays well enough, and that he's an insurance policy.
But now you only need one, right, Vince? Like, if this kid's a good player, you only need one of those young guys to step in.
Exactly.
Right now, you need 2, at least 2, if not 3. So, yeah. And I don't know if like Jordan Clark could play some safety. I have some doubts about just because of his size. I just don't understand why they're so unwilling to move Clarence Lewis to safety.
Seriously, it's right there in front of him.
Unless maybe he's the reason. Maybe he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, I guess that
could be true, but it's just like
it's right there.
Yeah, man, I don't get it. Like, I really don't get it. I'm starting to think that maybe Clarence just doesn't want to play safety, which would be kind of crazy to me because
he's not going to play. Period.
No, you're not an NFL corner, man. I mean, you're just not. You're Notre Dame's 5th corner right now, and you were a starter on a playoff team. Like, that tells you how. I mean, they've upgraded
past you, right? They've upgraded the position.
As a safety, I think this kid can play. I really do, because his one limitation, and it's the same thing I say about Rod Hurd. My one big knock on Rod Hurd is he's just not really good in coverage. As a just line up and cover a guy like on the second level as a corner or nickel, but you project that to the 3rd level, and his coverage ability becomes better, and his game projects better.
Right,
and that's how I feel about Clarence. Maybe he doesn't want to do it though. Who knows?
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
Yeah, but yeah, I still like, man. It just seems like a no-brainer, right?
Move should have been made 2 years ago.
Yeah. It really does. I think Jaden Mickey's another guy that could be a really good safety. I highly doubt he has any desire to go to safety. But as physical as Jaden is, I could see Jaden being like an Alohi Gilman type of safety. Yeah, I think he'd be really good there. You just can't move him away from corner, though.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
He's one of your
that's
3 best corners.
right.
And I think he could be the starting nickel. So,
Right.
like, that
Exactly.
I think
And that's a
moving him to
cross
safety
train that'd
actually
be a little
hurts
easier.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
At corner. Yeah.
yes.
Because then what if one of your guys goes down and now you've had him
Right.
deprogrammed from playing corner? It's
Right.
easier to go from safety or from nickel to corner and corner to nickel than it is to go from safety to corner and
Right.
corner to safety. So yeah, I agree. If Ryan Barnes had panned out, I think maybe then you could have justified maybe moving Jaden Mickey. But right now, like you'd have your 2 starters in Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison, and then Chance Tucker. And then after that, it's Micah Bell, who maybe he could step up, and then the freshman.
Yeah.
And you're in the same boat you kind of are at safety, where you don't know what's
Right.
there because they're young.
Too many question marks.
Micah Bell having a big offseason could maybe change some things about that. Because if you get his speed in the lineup as a nickel or a third corner, then okay, now you're cooking. Now Christian Gray's the slow guy. Or
Right.
I mean Benjamin Morrison's the slow guy at corner at that point in time. Think about that.
Yeah.
Because I think Christian Gray's probably a little faster. And I think that Micah Bell's faster than anyone they have on the team. So yeah, that's pretty fast. And then we'll end with a super sticker from Jim DeMatteis. I appreciate you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Very, very much, man.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, if that's going to do it, then we appreciate everybody hanging out for the mailbag and for our offensive look at 2023. Remember, it's going to be Brian's show tomorrow, and then it was going to be Brian and I back on Thursday. We're going to do the same thing we did today, but the defensive side of the football, and then Friday is going to be a free-for-all mailbag. Can't wait. And then we've got IB Nation Sports Talk as well all week, except for tomorrow. Tonight, it's going to be a 3-man booth. And then Thursday is going to be Jesse and myself. And then Friday is going to be another 3-man booth. So lots of content coming your way. So make sure you guys check it out. So 3-man booth comes your way in about an hour and a half. In the meantime, I just feel like there's a ham sandwich waiting for me upstairs. I'm super fired up about it. But make sure you guys hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, share with your family and friends. Check out the boards at irishbreakdown.com. And then, of course, irishbreakdown.com as well. Ryan is down in San Antonio for the All-American game. So there's going to be all kinds of fun stuff that we're going to be putting up here because he's down there and doing his thing. And again, no shortage of info here, folks. So make sure you stay locked in to Irish Breakdown and the Irish Breakdown podcast. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.